Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Staffing shortages and funding shortages and pressure to do more with less is at the heart of the VA long wait times for veterans to get medical care. That's according to the union that represents VA workers. Marilyn Park is legislative director for the American Federation of Government Employees.
I think it's getting worse as the VA keeps expecting the frontline providers and their support personnel to be doing more with less. It really is the root cause of the problem. As long as we have scheduling clerks who we represent who keep telling us we don't have appointments. Now, they're not cooking the books, but they're just telling us what it's like on the front lines every day to be not having enough provider appointments to fill, to put veterans into. And then we have the providers on the other end saying, we just keep being told to take thousands and thousands of more patients, hundreds of each provider, way above the limit that even VA puts on paper, and keep taking them because they won't hire. And when they do hire, people leave because of very, very difficult working conditions.
AFGE wants a reallocation of resources to frontline caregivers and support staff at the VA so they have the resources to properly care for military veterans. McDonald's workers and their supporters were back at Hamburglar HQ in Illinois Thursday, a day after more than 100 were arrested as they took their fight for $15 an hour and a union to the company's shareholders meeting. Devontae Yates was one of the McDonald's workers arrested. He describes how it felt to be met with riot police instead of respectful dialogue with McDonald's management.
For me, I felt like, in a way, hurt, because it's like, instead of listening to the people who make your company, instead of listening to, individuals who work for you, you have riot cops outside ready to kick us off the property. To me, it's like, there's things you don't even really care what we have to say, It's like, hurry up and get off my property, they're a nuisance, but I don't think that's right, because we're workers. We make your company thrive. We made you that $5.6 billion profit. The least you can do is just hear us out.
Despite being arrested Wednesday, Devontae and the other McDonald's workers were right back at McDonald's headquarters again Thursday.
Me being arrested the day before and coming back, to me it just shows them, like, you can do whatever you want to do. You can put whatever you want to put in my way, any obstacle. We're going to cross them, and we're going to keep fighting, and we're going to keep doing what we have to do. You can lock us up as many times as you want. You can have riot cops anywhere you want. It's not going to stop us, because we know what we want. We know what we're worth, and we're going to keep fighting for it.
The Chicago Teachers Union is out with a report analyzing the impact of 50 school closings in Chicago a year after the city's Board of Education voted to close the schools. The union says promises of millions of dollars in aid to schools that took students from the closed schools were hollow in many cases and only partially fulfilled in others. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I can drag it into the bathroom and drown it up.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
West side people don't surrender. They've been down, but they still rock on. Oh, and this time is my time. Alright, love, hater, it don't matter. I'm gonna stand and fight. This time is my time. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause this is my town.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here tonight on the big program. Lots of things to talk about, lots of things to get to, odds and ends. It is the end of the week. It is the day before the big holiday weekend. In fact, as you find, when Monday is a holiday weekend, when Monday's there, Friday is usually checkout day. So we're a little light on guests tonight on the program. Everybody left, especially look, You look at what the big run up to the primary on Tuesday, all the work people are putting in, the 100-hour weeks. Now's a little bit of break, a little bit of time to take a breath, enjoy the weekend. Tuesday, get your behinds back to work. That's what the advice I would give to the Wolf campaign, because the Corbett campaign, they've come out swinging. They've come out swinging with tons of false attack ads. And look, it's like all of these attacks. If you really have nothing to run on, if you have no positive record, you have to point at the other guy. And it doesn't matter what you're talking about. That's reality in all life. So in looking back at the primary, and if you look at the Democratic primary, because Corbett didn't have an opponent, someone tried to get on the ballot, but Corbett had him removed from the ballot, didn't have the right number of signatures. And look, if you don't play by the rules, you go. That's just how it goes. But very interesting how that happened. Anyway, so on the Democratic side, you had four very, very formidable candidates. And I would argue that Wolf came out of the box first. My biggest complaint about the McCord campaign is people were going, well, when's it going to start? And by the time people were going, when's it going to start, I actually thought it was over. And that's kind of what happened to all of the whole field. Wolf came out big, early, spent big money early. You know, beginning of the end of last year, beginning of the year, was already well ahead. And it was basically over at that point. And I remember, a couple of months into it, people were going, Treasurer, you getting into this? And people are a little slow to it. But if you look at the Wolf campaign, and one of the things that I really like about what Tom Wolf has done, very positive, very goal-oriented, very, as a matter of fact, this is the vision for the future. This is the vision. This is where we're going to go. The Corbett camp has come out, and without a record to run on, look, you look at the budgets that he's put forth the last 3 years, austerity budgets, massive cuts to education, massive cuts to health and human services, massive cuts to investments, except, that $2.5 billion transportation bill that, again, was a lot less than even his own commission said we needed. So we're still falling behind because of the lack of investment that this governor has seen fit to pursue. And why? Well, because we've got to give more tax handouts. We've got to more sweeteners, if you will. We can't assess any revenue to the drillers, because the belief is, and it really is blind faith belief, that if we tax them, then they'll leave, like the gas they can get from somewhere else. So when you don't have a positive record to run on, you've got to attack. And that's what the Corbett people have done. The jobs record, not so good. The education record, horrible. And as we've talked about the last couple of days, this 7-year-old child, and we still don't know what it is, what took this child's life. We still don't know what, and we may not know for some time, or if we ever get to know why this child died when he did. But I look at this and I go, with a nurse in the building, with a nurse on the scene, maybe you have a fighting chance. Maybe that kid gets that chance. And as I talked about last night, look, I've taken CPR a number of times. I used to be a first responder, a hazmat first responder. That was one of the things I did for a while. And you would take these CPR courses, and they were 4-hour courses. Anybody who's ever taken the Red Cross CPR course knows what you do. You go and you sit in the classroom. Someone, rattles on what you have to do. They demonstrate what you do, and then you break up into little groups, and you get a little rescue Annie doll, and you pump away at her and do all this other stuff. And maybe you do it right, maybe you don't. And then at the end of the day, hey, you got a little card to put in your wallet because now you're CPR qualified. And as I said, 5 years. I think 5 times I took it, and I think they're good for 2 years, right? I think 2 years, but I took it 5 times, And at no point was I ever really confident in the idea that I could, in the event of an emergency, adequately and properly administer CPR without doing damage. I never really felt comfortable. Now, would I have tried? Sure. If you know, this is the last hope. It's the last hope. But I never felt confident doing it. And, you know, I got a number of emails from folks who said, you know, I'm in the same position. You know, we took it as part of work. We took it, you know, when I took lifeguard training, when I took babysitting training, you know, whatever. And I got a number of these emails of people going, you know, I didn't realize that schools didn't have nurses, that it wasn't mandated. Because I think there's a lot of things that we take for granted, that we think, well, the law is what it is, right? You would think as a matter of law, like, for instance, a big one. I think most people think that in the state of Pennsylvania, kindergarten is something that's mandatory. When I moved here, I thought it was mandatory when we had our children. I thought it was mandatory. Evidently not here in Pennsylvania. Not mandatory. In fact, I remember, and this really came to highlight for me when the Harrisburg School District was talking about doing away with their kindergarten altogether. And a couple of other struggling school districts were talking about doing away with it altogether because they couldn't provide the transportation because of returning to a half-day format. And, you know, there's a lot of these things, like a librarian, a guidance counselor, class sizes. I've had conversations with people who say, well, you know, isn't that the law? Isn't it like you can't have more than 22 kids in the classroom? And I go, I don't know where you think that, but there's no such law. And the same thing with a nurse. I mean, I had 3 people go, don't they, as a matter of law, have to have a nurse? Don't you have to have someone qualified? And the answer is no. As far as I know, as far as we've been able to see it, look, as I said yesterday, 110 nurses, over a third, close to 40% of all the nurses in the Philadelphia School District gone, left. And not left, kicked to the curb. Sorry, there's the door. We don't need you. Budget cuts. And why? Because of our governor. So when you have that kind of record, this is the first time, and last night we talked with Jerry Jordan, the president of the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers, and he said never in his memory have they had 2 children who have died during a school year. In fact, you know, he said that he doesn't remember it ever happening like this. Never. And he's been there for years. And as I looked on the Googles and all the other web searches, it's not something you find other places either. And why is that? I don't know. Other than schools have nurses. They have someone there who is trained, qualified, and on top of things. And it just so happened, you know, I said this yesterday, it just so happens that the very next day, on Thursday, we get an email from our school, my second grade son's school, saying, hey, you know, we need his dental records. The school nurse needs to make sure that he's up to date. There's someone other than parents tracking the kids' health. They need physicals, they need their shot records, they need their dental records, they need all of this stuff. And there's someone there who is making sure that the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, the period's at the end, and everything's, as my grandfather would say, copacetic. Everything's in place. Everything's as it should be. And if there's a child who has asthma or who has a special need or who has a condition or an allergy or who knows what, that nurse knows it. And how do I know this? Well, I asked. Back in September, when the 6th grade girl in Philadelphia died because of breathing-related, asthma-related illness that was let to fester the entire day because nobody really knew. I mean, it's September. It's the beginning of the year. Who could possibly know other than a nurse who has these records from, I don't know, last year? So you look at this and you go, 2 kids, 2 young lives lost. Why? Because of budget cuts. And you go, wow, Rick, we can't throw money at everything. And you're right, we can't throw money at everything. Money isn't the only thing, but in a case when you don't have it and there's no one there, it really does matter. And it really does make a difference. My grandfather always said money doesn't matter until you don't have it. And this is a perfect scenario. They don't have it because the governor's taken it. And not only has he taken the money from the budget, he's also split the pot in half with these insane charter schools. And I got an email. It was Richard sent me an email that said basically Philadelphia is, how did he put it? There's a charter school on every freaking block, he said. Nail salons, barber shops, and charter schools. He said it's the new economy, and he goes, oh yeah, daycare centers, thousands of them. Is that the new economy? And the sad reality is it's the poverty economy. But what it's doing is it's tearing us all down. It's destroying public education, and it's costing lives. And what's amazing to me is we'll roll that dice and put those children's lives on the line. And I got to wonder how many parents who sit on the SRC, the School Reform Commission there in Philadelphia, how many of their children go to those schools that don't have a nurse? How many of their children go to those schools with enlarged class sizes? How many of those folks send their kids to a place with no counselors or librarians? You kind of got to wonder. Because if it's not good enough for you, then why is it good enough for anyone else? Just a thought. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The Rick Smith Show.
Time for the world in 2 minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, reporting for Talk Radio News Service at the United Nations. By the end of Memorial Day weekend, 4 countries will hold key presidential votes. And to give each a fair share of attention, I've divvied up the next 90 seconds relative to their population. Ukraine votes Sunday, and a deeply religious, pro-European integration chocolate tycoon is a clear favorite to win. Pedro Poroshenko has revolutionary chops and government experience without the baggage of having to rule or make tough decisions during Ukraine's current crisis. And that crisis is the real wild card here. Can the new Ukrainian government pull off a nationwide vote? And how will Russia respond? In Colombia, incumbent President Juan Manuel Santos is a champion of negotiations to reintegrate the FARC rebel group into political society. But he faces stiff competition from Oscar Zuluaga, who opposes the ongoing talks. FARC violence has claimed more than 100,000 lives since the 1960s, and ending that bloodshed is a national priority. But miscalculating the public's appetite for rebel reconciliation could cost Santos his job. And in Egypt, the leader of last year's coup against Muslim Brotherhood President Mohamed Morsi, that's Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, is a lock for the country's top job. Justice has been harsh in Egypt since that coup. Look no further than the 1,200 death sentences handed to Muslim Brotherhood supporters recently. And Sisi is of the mindset that nixing government threats is key to prosperity. Egypt certainly needs to bring back tourists and foreign investment dollars to stay afloat, but it's unclear how many rights abuses foreign capitals will put up with in betting on the Arab world's largest democracy. And finally, Lithuania. Well, that was their national anthem at the top of the show. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Hey there, fellow working class heroes. I have some great news. You can now get the Rick Smith Show podcast on your iPhone, Android, BlackBerry, or Palm on demand and on the go. Get your class war to go by downloading the Stitcher app on your smartphone by going to Stitcher.com and search for The Rick Smith Show, or go to our website at thericksmithshow.com and click on our Stitcher button. Together we can, and we will, rebuild a prosperous working class and leave opportunity for our children.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-888-520-RICK. That's 1-888-520-7425.
Every now and then I visit an elementary school. Talking with children is a pretty good idea, I think. They ask questions we don't think about, and they ask them very directly. Recently, a little girl wanted to know, what's the hardest part of your job? That got me thinking. I looked down and I told her, the hardest part is telling people no.
Well, we'll see. It'll be nice to say goodbye to him come November. This has been a bad experiment. This has been a bad 3.5 years. And look, I don't know anyone other than a handful of folks who really, were able to pocket a bunch of favors from this administration who are happy with them. I know that the themed message is, well, we didn't raise your taxes, but look at your local property taxes. And I had this conversation a couple of days back where a guy, was telling me the reason he was voting for Corbett, and he said, well, because he kept his promise, he didn't raise any taxes. I go, well, if he didn't raise any state taxes, you're right. But what about your local taxes? Because remember, everything rolls downhill. So they cut money coming from the state to your local school district, to your local municipality. They cut funding to programs in your local community. Someone had to make those up, or they don't happen. So, explain to me. And I guess, part of the problem is this lack of understanding of this interconnectivity, this how things actually work. That, if you're going to starve the beast, you're going to starve government. You're going to starve them in Washington, drag them in the bathtub, drown them in the bathtub. Then you just don't get investment. And then you end up with roads and bridges and all the stuff that are crumbling. And understand, our nation is crumbling on so many levels. And what's frustrating to me is, I think back to, my grandparents and the conversations that I had with my grandfather about, investing in the future and doing for your children. And, this idea that it's not just about you. This idea that there's something called the commons. There's the common good. There's we the people. And I love those who tell me that, well, we're an individualist country, but somehow we're united. I'm confused at how that ideology, how it can bang around in someone's head to where, hooray for me, screw everybody else, but somehow we're one nation under God. A God that wants you to be an individual and screw everybody else. I somehow lose that. Somehow the whole argument loses me in this fog. And you see people like Ted Cruz, who's basically just insane. I don't know how else to come up with it. It just basically, the guy's insane. He was giving a speech to a bunch of religious people, a bunch of pastors, a bunch of folks. I think it was that insane group, the Family Research Council. They had a big breakfast kind of thing for all these pastors. I think it was something called a Watchman on the Wall. So you can hear, he's giving this spiel, and I can't even. It's one of those things that I don't even really want to say. because you got to hear it for yourself to go, man, BS. And get your BS detectors ready because, well, here comes Senator Cruz.
When you think it can't get any worse, it does. This year, I'm sorry to tell you, the United States Senate is going to be voting on a constitutional amendment to repeal the First Amendment. I am telling you, I am not making this up. Senator Chuck Schumer has announced the Senate Democrats are scheduling a vote on a constitutional amendment to give Congress the plenary power, the unlimited authority to regulate political speech.
Yes, yes. Going to regulate political speech. Say what you can say, what you can talk to your neighbors about. Well, the problem is, it's not true. And I love that. They're going to repeal the First Amendment, along with the Second, the Fourth, the Fifth, the 14th. You're going to repeal the whole damn thing. Now, not that they stand a snowball's chance of that actually happening. Not that that could even remotely come to pass. And there's nobody, not even me, who would like to see what they've proposed move forward. But Senate Joint Resolution 19 going nowhere. It's got 41 co-sponsors. You need 2/3 of the House and Senate to do this. Not to mention all of the other stuff that comes along with repealing a constitutional amendment. And even I understand it's an election year stunt to say, look, our democracy is being purchased. We are basically an oligarchy. There are a handful of people who have so much power, so much control. This is not good for democracy. Yet you've got Ted Cruz saying, oh, they're going to repeal the First Amendment, and you're going to get the short end of the stick. He continues.
When you think it can't get any worse, it does. This year, I'm sorry to tell you, the United States Senate is going to be voting on a constitutional amendment to repeal the First Amendment.
Yes. Going to repeal that First Amendment because they hate the Constitution. Did you know that? Democrats hate it. Hate the whole thing. Hate the whole idea of it. It's bad. Just bad. And what it really is it's this move to amend thing where they're saying, you know what, we need to cut down on the amount of money in politics. We need to be moving towards maybe publicly funded elections, which I have been saying, I think one of the very first 2 or 3 shows that I've ever done. Go back to 2005. I've been talking about getting money out of politics since then. And I'm still in favor of a way of doing away with the big moneyed special interests and actually bringing average, everyday people's voices back into it. Now, he's talking about Citizens United because the Supreme Court decided out of whole cloth they're going to make new law. And this McCutcheon decision is another one of those really, really wonderful decisions. It's going to uphold minority rights. These 600 really, really well-to-do, heavily funded, very wealthy people, 600 of them can't spend as much money as they want to spend on buying our electorate. So our Supreme Court said, well, minority rights. We're going to protect the rights of this disenfranchised, this abused, this neglected minority of billionaires. We're going to side with them. But oddly enough, a couple of days prior, they had actually gone against minorities and done away with affirmative action on a certain in a number of scenarios. And you go, how do you justify the two? I understand John Roberts are going to call balls and strikes. What kind of nearsighted umpire do we have here? Is it a moving strike zone? I don't think anyone asked that. Maybe someone should have asked, well, what kind of strike zone are we talking about? Are we talking about one that it's got a good luck hitting it? It's always moving. But you got Cruz who's running around saying, well, they're going to repeal the First Amendment, and then they're coming for your religion. They're coming for your religion, and they're coming for your rights to free speech. and your right to assemble. But the press, he said, oh, the press is protected. The New York Times is protected. But so would be fake news. Never mind that. We're pandering here, Rick. Don't you know that? We're pandering to the faithful. And that's what the right does very well. Masterfully, I may add. They get people all whipped up into a frenzy. They get them all angry and ready to, and foaming at the mouth, ready to go to battle. We're going to take on those godless heathen liberals. Now, what's odd to me is, the most faithful people I think I've ever met are people who call themselves liberals. Very strange. And we do live in a very strange time, when the moneyed interests and the people who control the message and the voice and the media, they feel like they're somehow being persecuted. Very, very strange. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people from the talk.
During the audience, he issued another warning.
Nostro in confronto al creato.
Pope Francis calls on Christians to protect creation, or else.
We need to get over this angry hatredness and really turn to following the God that I know best in Christ and His love and leading us out of climate change.
Evangelical environmentalists organize to address climate change. CNN's chief says climate change is too boring to cover. Plus,
they are a spectacular sight.
Meet your newest national monument, Organ Pipes Desert Peaks in New Mexico.
All of those too boring stories straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Pat Sajak, the Wheel of Fortune host, spun out of control on Twitter this week. Sajak blasted environmentalists saying global warming alarmists are unpatriotic racists.
Unpatriotic racists. That makes no sense at all. Could I buy a clue? This is your Green News Report.
Wheel of Denial.
Okay, Desi Doyen, I'm noticing a religious theme to today's episode of the GNR. Am I correct?
Yes, you are, absolutely.
See, nothing gets by me. Very sharp.
You're very quick.
Yes.
We start with Pope Francis.
Who?
He says we have a moral obligation to address climate change and care for creation in a landmark catechesis.
A what?
It's called a catechesis. And that was this week before a massive crowd in Rome. Pope Francis said that Christians should be, quote, custodians of creation, and warned that failure to care for the planet risks dire consequences.
The Pope hates America. Press on.
Nostro in confronto al creato.
We must protect creation, because if we destroy creation, creation will destroy us. Never forget this.
Totally hates America.
Well, the Pope would disagree with you. His speech came on the heels of a week-long sustainability summit at the Vatican focused on finding ways for the Catholic Church to address the disproportionate impact of climate change on the global poor. And in the U.S., that concept is also gaining ground, with a growing number of evangelical organizations working on what they call creation care, trying to convince their fellow Christians to stop denying the science of climate change and instead address it and protect the environment. The Reverend Mitch Hescox, president of the Evangelical Environmental Network, told CNN this week that his goal is to get past political partisanship.
But I think that's one of the problems in America today. And my job is to cross that bridge. We don't want to beat up anybody, but we want to be the bridge builder that truly offers the love of Christ to help them to realize the serious impact and the serious nature of climate change.
Okay, that guy hates America too. The Evangelical Church and the Catholic Church both hate America. great.
No, actually, I think they're trying to make sure that people pay attention to, God's creation.
Whatevs.
Now, again, that interview was on CNN, which has been roundly criticized for focusing on stories like the missing Malaysian airliner and failing to cover the threat of climate change. The president of CNN, Jeffrey Zucker, sparked quite a bit of controversy this week when he admitted at an event in New York that CNN does not cover climate change enough, but he essentially blamed viewers for being bored, saying, quote, "We haven't figured out how to engage the audience in that story in a meaningful way. When we do those stories, there does tend to be a tremendous amount of lack of interest on the audience's part."
Hey, Jeff Zucker, Brad Friedman, and Desi Doyen of the Green News Report are ready to come to CNN and liven things up a bit with some not boring at all green news. Give us a call.
Or alternatively, CNN loves to cover natural disasters, so maybe we should just wait until there are so many disasters that it interests Jeff Zucker.
Oh, so you're not saying it'd be a natural disaster if you and I were on CNN?
Certainly not.
Thank you. Okay.
Meanwhile, like the Pope, President Obama was also focused on good stewardship of the earth this week when he signed a proclamation formally designating nearly 500,000 acres of land in southern New Mexico as the new Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument.
More than 130 years ago, Billy the Kid took cover and literally left his mark, inscribing his name into what we now know as Outlaw Rock. You can see it today, and I want to make sure that future generations can see it as well. And all of it supports the local economy and jobs in the region. So we're not just preserving history. Outdoor recreation at parks and forests and other public lands brings in tourism dollars. I've preserved more than 3 million acres of public lands for future generations, and I am not finished. So
there goes Obama, big government taking over all our public lands. Somebody call Cliven Bundy.
Now, national monument status will ensure that future generations can also see the Native American petroglyphs in that national monument. Cattle will still be allowed to graze there, but all drilling and fracking will be prohibited.
Land grabber. For much more on those stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website, not CNN's, at greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help the Green News Report stay on the air until we are hired by CNN. Find us on the Facebook and follow us on the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been...
This is CNN.
No, this has been your Green News Report.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Janice sent me an email during the break. It caught my attention. You're talking about Reince Priebus. You're talking about Ted Cruz, and you're talking about it's the end of the First Amendment. Don't you know it's the end of the First Amendment as we know it? They're going to repeal the entire First Amendment.
When you think it can't get any worse, it does. This year, I'm sorry to tell you, the United States Senate is going to be voting on a constitutional amendment to repeal the First Amendment.
Oh, they're going to repeal the First Amendment. Oh, it's going to happen. So Janice sends me this email, a New York Times article that says the RNC, the Republican National Committee, has filed a complaint today to force the Federal Elections Commission to allow them to raise unlimited, what we used to call soft money, from very, very wealthy people. So the Koch brothers no longer will have to, and this has always been one of those bones of contention between the RNC and all of these front groups, because the RNC goes, that's our money, we want it. We want the rich people to give it to us, not to those super PACs. Give it to us, because we're the party. Think about this. On one hand, you've got think about it now. Now, this is important. You've got Ted Cruz running around saying, oh, those Democrats, they want to silence you. And then you've got Reince Priebus, the head of the RNC, filing a lawsuit saying we want to spend as much money so we can inundate you. I wonder which it is. Now, would I like to see there be money out of the game? Absolutely. Would I like to see a public matching kind of system to where you put a maximum on how much money people can put into the system and it would be matched? Yeah, I would like to see that. And then you hold accountable the Denise D'Souza's of the world who cheat and put money in other people's name. And I hope he goes to jail. I hope he does some serious time. I'm sure he would be very popular in prison. I'm sure he would be known as the tossed salad man, for those of you who have listened to Chris Rock in the past, and you'll get that reference. I'm not going into what it is. Let your imagination run wild if you have to, but just with a little syrup or jelly. So you figure it out. But the thing is, you look at all of this cash that goes into the system, and what does it end up getting us? It ends up getting us a system of people who are beholden to the cash. And, to be honest, Democrats aren't a whole hell of a lot different than the Republicans when it comes to the moneyed interests. The Supreme Court's surely bought and paid for. I know my conservative friends they love to run around, the activist judges, they on their social issues. You want to talk about real activism on the part of justices? You want to talk about the real activism? Look at the decisions that they've made in favor of corporate America. Look at the decisions that they've made against working people, against consumers. This nonsense, this ridiculous, regurgitated BS talking point that, we care about the consumers and the free market. We love the free market, especially when we can cheat it. When we rig the game in our favor. We love the free market. It's fabulous. It's a fabulous thing. Free market's great, as long as you're the guy setting the rules. But this is, I appreciate the email, Janice. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I do appreciate and use the emails often because, look, the power of we the people, so vitally important. The fact that we can communicate, we come here 3 hours each night, we share information, we talk about important issues. This is the kind of stuff that the Reince Priebus's of the world, this is the stuff that the right wing, the wealth class of this country, they don't want. They don't want conversation. Why do you think conservative talk radio has been consolidated down to a handful of national programs where you're not going to have honest discussion? And I just found out here recently, Ed Schultz is leaving the terrestrial airwaves. It's a tough gig, especially when you don't have as many places to go. And I would argue that along with the money being taken out of politics, along with setting some sane, rational limits and maybe talking about publicly financed elections, we need to go and break up. Where's our Teddy Roosevelt? Get me a halfway decent Republican to start breaking up some of these massive conglomerations, these huge multinational corporations. I have no idea how it is with our antitrust laws. You can look at some of these companies and go, it's all fine. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Yeah, they'll do what's in the best interest of we the people. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. And you get those who say, there are 400 channels on your DirecTV or 600 or 900. And they go, of the 600 channels, about 599 of them aren't worth a darn. So I look at this and I go, there's a lot of work to be done, folks. A lot of things that we need to be thinking about and concentrating on and not being distracted. The shiny things got to be put aside for a little bit, just for a little bit. And we've got to start focusing on things that are really important to our family. And when we come back, we're going to talk about jobs, because jobs, that's the center focus. And an interesting ruling today by the WTO that, it's about damn time. And it's about time the U.S. does something about it. But we'll talk about that when we come back. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Trees of green, red roses too. I see them blue for me and you. And I say to myself, oh,
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Progress. In the 2012 elections, Republicans cast themselves as budget balancers by promising to whack welfare programs for the poor, snarling that such people are takers and moochers. Such vindictive sourness didn't play too well with voters, and Republicans now seem to have learned their lesson. Oh, they're still going after food stamps, school lunches, etc., with a vengeance, but this time with a gentle, even loving tone. The GOP's official message massagers now have their members saying that they want to, quote, help the poor by eliminating those programs, referring to them as soulless giveaways that sap their initiative and tether them to the cold, uncaring hand of government. The message is, we're doing this for the poor people's own good. Their chief budgeteer, Representative Paul Ryan, trotted out this theme at a recent right-wing rally, condemning school lunches as unloving Obama fare plopped on plates by unsmiling cafeteria personnel. What they're offering people is a full stomach and an empty soul, he oozed. If that doesn't make you gag, try another subsidized lunch program that tender-hearted GOP budget whackers never mention, much less demand that it be eliminated. It's the tax subsidy for corporate meals, drinks, and entertainment. Multimillionaire CEOs can go whining and dining on your and my dime, writing off their high-dollar lunches, cocktails, dinners, and club hopping as a business expense. And expensive it is for us taxpayers. This subsidy adds up to more than $12 billion a year. And that doesn't count the human cost of executive initiative that is sapped by this giveaway, and the lack of love a CEO feels from being dependent on unsmiling taxpayers. This is Jim Hightower saying we ought to be subsidizing healthy meals for poor people, especially school kids, but not a dime for fat cat CEOs dining out at Chez Gourmand.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's populist take on what the powers that be are up to. Find out more at hightowerlowdown.org.
Time for change. It's time to rearrange.
Keeping the chambers of commerce within their gated communities. The Rick Smith Show.
You can't tell me we're gonna make it somehow. I heard a wise man say the revolution starts now. I think it's time for change.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Of course, if you missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast there from the website or get the Stitcher app on the smartphone very soon. The Rick Smith Show app will be out. You get that and have the program all day long. Whenever you want it, right there, always at your fingertips, with all of the ways to interact. And we're really looking forward to the rollout of that very, very soon. So the big news, you may remember, this is going back, I think, 2011. You remember the tire case? I remember Cooper Tire because we had guys from Findlay, Ohio on the program like every day for like a month as this tire situation was going on, as Cooper Tire, and this is, you gotta love corporate America. What they did is they decided, okay, well, it's cheaper to go over to China and make our tires, bring them back here, and we can dump them. And, oh, by the way, we'll get all of the subsidies that the Chinese government hands out. As any manufacturer will tell you, the Chinese government, as long as you're going there, setting up your business to employ their people for export, not for domestic consumption, they'll fund you heavily. They don't want you building stuff for local consumption. They don't want that. They want you to set up to export. So the idea is, especially in the tires, because these are folks who they look long term. As where our CEOs are thinking, how can I pump up my stock price in the next quarter so I can get a bigger bonus? The communist capitalists look to the next 5 years, 10 years, 25 years. They're looking down the road. Which industries are we going to take over and control? And at this time, back in 2011, tires that was going to be it. That was one of the things they were going after heavily. And the numbers of jobs, hundreds of thousands of jobs were lost in the process. And Cooper Tire was okay with it. I remember talking to the union guys who were saying, well, the bosses are okay with it. We're going to move production over there. Company's going to make a ton of money. Granted, the employees are going to get screwed. Nobody's going to have jobs here. But the bottom line, the profits. Oh, the profits. Ooh, sent shivers down my, the profits. Oh, warm and fuzzy feeling all over the profits. Well, the steel workers said, no, we're not going to let that happen. And we're going to do all the research and we're going to drop it in the Obama administration's lap. So back in 2011, the Obama administration took the case that the steel workers had put together and took it to the WTO and won. They had to actually start producing tires in the U.S. Cooper Tire not happy. Profits not as high as they would have been had they been able to produce the tire in China and bring it back here tire free. So in response to that, in retaliation to that decision, the Chinese then say, well, kind of a tit for tat kind of thing, we're going to impose duties on big U.S. cars and SUVs, a 21.5% tariff. Which, the U.S. said nonsense and began fighting that in the WTO. But here's the thing, and this is what gets me about these trade. This was 2011. And in 2012, the Obama administration made an election year decision to make a big deal out of this because they needed votes in Ohio. Well, here we are, 2014. And the WTO has sided with the U.S. And what does that mean? Well, it means that the tariff has to come off. Now, the Chinese can appeal it and probably will, because they'll still be able to keep putting money into their pockets as this whole thing is appealed. Because right now you're talking about $5 billion a year in sales. Anything from the Jeep Cherokee to the Cadillac Escalade. And it makes me go back and think about our trade policies as a whole, what we've allowed to happen. We have set up a situation where China's in the driver's seat, so to speak, because they cheat. And I've got a bunch of emails from people going, well, China's not the only one that cheats. We cheat too. And you're right. But not to the same extent. There is, and I can say this very clear consciously, that there is no plan. There is no federal plan to take over any industries. There isn't even a plan to really bring manufacturing back. The Republican plan would be, let's give them more tax breaks and drill, baby, drill. That'll bring them back. No, it won't. And the Democrats' plan is, well, we'll add them some sweeteners and we'll give them tax breaks and loopholes and job training and that stuff, and we'll do whatever they want us to do. And that'll bring them back. No, it won't. The thing that brings them back is you don't have a choice. You want access to our market, you produce here. At some point, we have to look at our trade policies and go, the trade policies are the problem. The neoliberal trade policies of the 70s into the 80s and full bore in the 90s has failed us. And we need to realize that. We need to come to the table and go, you know what? NAFTA, all of that, bad ideas. It hasn't worked for average, everyday working people. It has worked now. Now, look, it hasn't failed everybody. Wall Street's happy. The financial sector is very happy because they get access to these other markets. Our banks are happy because they've grown bigger and bigger. But for the average everyday citizen, this is a major screw job. in every way, shape, or form. And, you know, I remember talking about, I think it was back in 2012, the auto parts industry that, because you remember the big Delphi bankruptcy? That was really brought on by Chinese dumping. There was a whole bunch of that went on because China wants the auto industry. And they want the parts, and they want the whole supply chain, like we used to have, until we allowed the companies to get greedy and start moving all over the place and breaking up that supply chain. And also with it, that innovation that this country is known for. You know, when I was a kid and growing up in the projects there in Cleveland, one of the only ways out was to work in one of those feeder plants or in the factory for Ford or Chevy, of which there were thousands of jobs, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of jobs. And I go home to visit my family, and you drive down Brook Park Road where both the Ford and the Chevy plant were. And you look at all those abandoned buildings that used to be little machine shops, where, you know, someone decided, hey, I can make this particular part, I can make it cheaply, and I can feed it to the company. Or, hey, we knew somebody, more likely we knew somebody at the plant and the higher up who set us up with this part, and we manufactured it, you know, with 10 or 20, maybe 30 employees, very small businesses that did quality work and fed right into the plant and got raises along with the auto workers. So as their wages went up, everybody's went up too. And then, well, all hell broke loose. You had the 60s where they started going, hey, we want to be moving. The auto industry's like, oh, we want to move to Brazil. We want to move out of the country and tear down capital borders. We want to expand. And you started seeing production offshore. And then you saw imports coming in from Japan competing heavily against U.S. automakers. And on different planes. Almost, if you look at it, as a way of setting them up to fail. But if you look back, and we've talked about this in the past, the auto parts industry, how the Chinese government has been illegally subsidizing their auto parts manufacturers to target what's left of ours. And, you know, they say, oh, predatory practices and all of this stuff. And I remember when I interviewed Hillary Clinton a number of years back in 2008 when she was running for president. And I said, hey, you know, what are we going to do with this? I mean, this is not a new problem, folks. This isn't new. This is something that's been going on for years. And I asked her, I said, you know, what are we going to do? You know, they're eating our lunch. And she said quite candidly, look, they're eating our lunch because we're letting them. Someone's got to stand up and say no more. And as I've said, we've lost hundreds of thousands of jobs, and there's a couple million more that can be lost because of our insane trade policies. And it comes back to us understanding this stuff. You know, oh yeah, we get cheaper, we get semi-cheaper stuff, and it's cheap crap is what it is. You know, you get a basket full of stuff from Walmart, oh, it lasts how long? A week, month, maybe? Now, granted, I haven't been to Walmart in about 20 years. Yeah, no, maybe a little less than 18 years. It was right before I met my wife. I got thrown out of one. I was wearing my Teamster jacket. They threw me out. Yeah, figure that one out. But it comes down to us. When we go to the aisle and we look at something, pick something up off the shelf, I don't want something made in China. I want something made here. I want something made by my neighbors. And we've got to have politicians who understand that. And I'm fearful that that's not discussed enough. It's not something that's high on the radar. We're too distracted, and this is the wealth class doing this to us. We're too distracted by everything else. So I'm telling you, we better get our eye on the ball. Quick break, right back with Hour 2. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show.
It's the Rick Smith Show on Country Gold Radio, WIOO Carlisle, and WEEO Shippensburg.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Staffing shortages and funding shortages and pressure to do more with less is at the heart of the VA long wait times for veterans to get medical care. That's according to the union that represents VA workers. Marilyn Park is legislative director for the American Federation of Government Employees.
I think it's getting worse as the VA keeps expecting the frontline providers and their support personnel to be doing more with less. It really is the root cause of the problem. As long as we have scheduling clerks who we represent who keep telling us consistently we don't have appointments. Now, they're not cooking the books, but they're just telling us what it's like on the front lines every day to be not having enough provider appointments to fill, to put veterans into, and then we have the providers on the other end saying we just keep being told to take thousands and thousands of more patients, hundreds of each provider, way above the limit that even VA puts on paper, and keep taking them because they won't hire, and when they do hire, people leave because of very, very difficult working conditions.
AFGE wants a reallocation of resources to frontline caregivers and support staff at the VA so they have the resources to properly care for military veterans. McDonald's workers and their supporters were back at Hamburglar HQ in Illinois Thursday, a day after more than 100 were arrested as they took their fight for $15 an hour and a union to the company's shareholders meeting. Devontae Yates was one of the McDonald's workers arrested. He describes how it felt to be met with riot police instead of respectful dialogue with McDonald's management.
For me, I felt like, in a way, hurt because it's like, instead of listening to the people who make your company, instead of listening to, individuals who work for you, you have riot cops outside ready to kick us off the property. To me, it's like that says you don't even really care what we have to say, It's like, you hurry up and get off my property, they're a nuisance. But I don't think that's right because we're workers. We make your company thrive. We made you that $5.6 billion profit. The least you can do is just hear us out.
Despite being arrested Wednesday, Devontae and the other McDonald's workers were right back at McDonald's headquarters again Thursday.
Me being arrested the day before and coming back, to me it just shows them like, you can do whatever you want to do. You can put whatever you want to put in my way, any obstacle. We're going to cross them, and we're going to keep fighting, and we're going to keep doing what we have to do. You can lock us up as many times as you want. You can have riot cops anywhere you want. It's not going to stop us because we know what we want. We know what we're worth, and we're going to keep fighting for it.
The Chicago Teachers Union is out with a report analyzing the impact of 50 school closings in Chicago a year after the city's Board of Education voted to close the schools. The union says promises of millions of dollars in aid to schools that took students from the closed schools were hollow in many cases and only partially fulfilled in others. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Do you advocate getting rid of the minimum wage? Would that create more jobs?
Absolutely, and it would help the poor, the people who need a job. The minimum wage is a mandate. We're against mandates, so why should we have it? No, it would be very beneficial.
Everything's raising but the wages. Everything's raising but the wages. Gasoline, groceries, and our hazes. Everything's raising but the wages. Everything's raising but the wages.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So and it's one of these really very interesting statements. You've got the guy who's the CEO of McDonald's, this Don Thompson, who, does pretty well for himself. He's the guy who, the 1 year, I guess it was last year, made $8.75 million, or more than 1 million hours worth of minimum wage, basically minimum wage work, 1.2 million. He said to the shareholders meeting on Thursday, we continue to believe that we pay fair and competitive wages. This is at a time when he reported to the shareholders that the company, the shareholders had received almost $5 billion in returns in 2013. At the same time, while you got a couple of thousand low-wage workers outside screaming, "Hey, we'd like a decent wage." And what I thought was very interesting, I always like this "we pay competitive wage" thing, because you start to go, well, competitive for what? I think back to the good old days, when you had high union density and, someone sweeping a broom was making 12 or 13 bucks an hour, something that you could support a family on because we rewarded work. We believed in people going to work. We believed in that ability of people to be able to support themselves through their work. And, could you argue that someone would do that job a lot cheaper? Well, of course you would. But the idea was not the race to the bottom. The idea was not being a bottom feeder, which is what we've got a lot of these low-wage companies. That's what they are. They're bottom feeders. So this idea of competitive wages, this is why I keep saying that you need to organize the entire industry. And, my background is in trucking. When I entered into the industry back in the mid to late 80s, you still had a good portion of the, something like 80% of the LTL market unionized. So wages were considerably higher. I mean, like I've said before, I made 15 bucks an hour back in 87. So you're making 14, 15 bucks an hour with benefits, with health care, with pension. They were making at top rate, I think it was close to 19 bucks an hour. And you could support a family on that. And you could support a family with one income on that. Because you had the whole industry almost in the same area, on the same playing field, in the same stadium at least. So competitive wages were, all in that same ballpark. So when you're saying, we pay competitive wages, well, competitive with crap. Competitive with nothing. So you've got a whole bunch of people who are paying, and this is where I love the Ron Paul quote that we started this off with. If you can get people to work for $1 an hour, a competitive wage is $1 an hour. If you can get people to work for a loaf of bread, a competitive wage is a loaf of bread, right? And the question then becomes, is that the kind of world that we want? Is this the kind of place that we want? Because there are those who believe that, I can go make my own deal. Well, that's a great idea if you can, if you have those skill sets. If you are one of the folks who has distinguished yourself to where you have the ability to go and do that, fantastic. But here's the reality. Most people don't. Most people who punch a clock and work for a paycheck, they don't. We've turned most jobs into assembly line work. I've had, and I probably should, well, maybe I will. I remember arguing grievances when I was a steward a number of years back where the terminal manager said, I can get any monkey to come in here and do this job. You are expendable. I don't need you. I don't want you. I don't want any of you guys. I could replace everybody tomorrow and then replace all of them the day after. And it's this mindset that you get from corporate America. So when I think back to our conversation with the happy lady last night, of which I took a beating over. I probably got 30 emails from people going, what the? I mean, immediately after I got off, after we hung up, I got an email saying, what the? WTF? What are you doing? And look, I wanted to have the conversation, because there's some place there for her to go, I believe in collective bargaining. And she said that. I don't think she knew what the hell collective bargaining is, but she said, I believe in people, coming together and making their lives better. That's empowering. And, to increase someone's gross domestic happiness. I say the best way to do that, you talk to some of these fast food workers. Right now, there's some happy folks because they see opportunity. They see a chance to make their lives better. They see engagement and empowerment, and they see relevance. What I love about the shareholders meeting at McDonald's outside of Illinois, they actually had and this is funny to me. The argument along with we pay competitive wages is that there's a way to move up in the company. that, you know, if you start working as the you know, the fry-a-later guy, you're going to work your way up. And it reminded me of the Eddie Murphy movie. If you remember, was it Coming to America, where he works in McDougal's, I think it was, and Louis Anderson was playing, you know, like one of his co-workers at McDougal's, and he goes, you know, I'm on the fry-a-later now, and eventually, you know, I'm gonna go to, you know, to Shakes, and then, you know, maybe to the grill, and that's when the big bucks start rolling in. And you know, is that how this works there? Because I've talked to a number of fast food workers, and it's, well, you get more responsibility. There's no more money. I know some of the assistant managers, and as you move up into the low-level managerial spots, there's not a lot more money. There's a lot more work, a lot more hours, a lot more responsibility. Not a lot more money. So he points out this one guy who is a chief operating officer, a guy named Tim Fenton, who is going to retire some point during this year. He started off as a crew member. Started off, you want fries with that, back in 1973, and worked his way up to being a chief operating officer. So there it is. Here's the one guy. How many people work at McDonald's? How many people have worked at McDonald's since 1973? There's one Tim Fenton. So this idea that, well, you know, there's all this room for advancement. No, there's not. You know where there's room for advancement? In their wages. You know where there's room for advancement? And maybe divvying up a portion of that $4.9 billion that went into the shareholders' pockets. Rick, that's sacrilege. We could never do that. We could never take from the shareholders. Shareholders are sacrosanct. Don't you know that? Oh, silly, silly man. Those workers that actually created the $4.9 billion in profit, they shouldn't be able to share in that. No. Can't have that. That would be bad. That would be bad. The $7.75 an hour is more than enough. It's very competitive. After all, if Ron Paul had his way, they'd be making $3 an hour, or maybe $2. And if we could flood the market more with those welfare people, it might be, you know, just work for a Happy Meal. You get a Happy Meal on the way out the door. And the other thing that gets me, and this is one of those sad realities of the low-wage workforce. These are the folks who are the most vulnerable. They're the ones who are fired for no reason. They're the ones, and I shouldn't say fired, because, you know, I have a friend who was an assistant manager at McDonald's, and he told me flat out, we've never fired anybody. We don't fire anyone. We just never call them back. We never put them on the schedule. So he says, you know, right now there are probably 100 people that are not on the schedule, that are technically employees, technically still working for McDonald's, but not on the schedule. And that means they can collect unemployment, what pathetic little bit of unemployment they can get. And you got to wonder how much gamesmanship goes into that, even, because of how Pennsylvania has changed the unemployment laws to where you need to have X amount of dollars in so many quarters, or you don't qualify for anything. It used to be where if you had 2 qualifying quarters, you'd get something to help you make it to the next time you could find a job. Not anymore. You could thank our Congressman Scott Perry for that. You could thank Tom Corbett for that. You could thank the Republican General Assembly for that, and a handful of Democrats who were given the okay. It was still a crummy bill. And the other part of it, and I don't even know if I want to get into that, because it just angers me to no end. You know, we hear the Republicans say, well, you know, we're broke, we don't have any money, we can't be bailing people out, yet we bailed the unemployment system out, put a huge bond on the back of the taxpayers, and gave the people who underfunded the original unemployment compensation fund, gave them a tax break. So not only did we bail out the bad fund of the past, we made it worse in the future and gave the people who did it a reward. Here's a cookie. Thanks for that. Oh, man, I got to tell you, I just see, this is what happens when I allow myself to wander, when I allow myself to go into, you know, down one road, and then it just branches off into 1,000 other moments of anger with this administration. and 1,000 other points of anger with the Republicans as a whole and the Democrats. Which is why it brings me back to just the very basic, simple point of view that I want to see the fast food industry organized. If across the industry, and this is the important part, you have to have the entire industry. There has to be a floor to where everyone is making a similar wage. And then you compete on not who's willing to work for less, not who's willing to slit their neighbor's throat for a penny, but on who produces the best quality whatever, chicken nugget, milkshake, French fry, whatever, in the most efficient, productive manner possible. That's where you compete, not on can we get government subsidies to make it through the end of the month, not on can we push our healthcare costs off onto government or off onto the individual who probably isn't going to be able to afford it. Or are our workers just going to live in homeless shelters? That's where we are. That's the sad reality of what we've allowed to happen. Now, the conversation has to be had at some point. Are we going to continue to prop up the low-wage economy? Are we going to prop it up with more subsidies? And if so, are we going to stop beating up the people who get them? The 47% that Romney and the Republicans love to point at, then we got to stop. We got to stop beating them up because that's what we've chosen. Or we allow them to organize, get a little dignity, a decent wage, maybe some health care, some retirement security, something for the work they do, and no taxpayer subsidies. At this point, it's either or. There's no hybrid plan. So it'll be interesting to see where we end up. Quick break, right back. Stick around.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Time for the world in 2 minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, reporting for Talk Radio News Service at the United Nations. By the end of Memorial Day weekend, 4 countries will hold key presidential votes. And to give each a fair share of attention, I've divvied up the next 90 seconds relative to their population. Ukraine votes Sunday, and a deeply religious, pro-European integration chocolate tycoon is a clear favorite to win. Pedro Poroshenko has revolutionary chops and government experience without the baggage of having to rule or make tough decisions during Ukraine's current crisis. And that crisis is the real wild card here. Can the new Ukrainian government pull off a nationwide vote? And how will Russia respond? In Colombia, incumbent President Juan Manuel Santos is a champion of negotiations to reintegrate the FARC rebel group into political society. But he faces stiff competition from Oscar Zuluaga, who opposes the ongoing talks. FARC violence has claimed more than 100,000 lives since the 1960s, and ending that bloodshed is a national priority. But miscalculating the public's appetite for rebel reconciliation could cost Santos his job. And in Egypt, the leader of last year's coup against Muslim Brotherhood President Mohamed Morsi, that's Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, is a lock for the country's top job. Justice has been harsh in Egypt since that coup. Look no further than the 1,200 death sentences handed to Muslim Brotherhood supporters recently. And Sisi is of the mindset that nixing government threats is key to prosperity. Egypt certainly needs to bring back tourists and foreign investment dollars to stay afloat, but it's unclear how many rights abuses foreign capitals will put up with in betting on the Arab world's largest democracy. And finally, Lithuania. Well, that was their national anthem at the top of the show. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Hey there, fellow working class heroes. I have some great news. You can now get the Rick Smith Show podcast on your iPhone, Android, BlackBerry, or Palm on demand and on the go. Get your class war to go by downloading the Stitcher app on your smartphone by going to Stitcher.com and search for The Rick Smith Show, or go to our website at thericksmithshow.com and click on our Stitcher button. Together we can, and we will rebuild a prosperous working class and leave opportunity for our children.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
The man who sends the investor class diving through their tax shelters. Rick Smith.
At every trough you stop to feed. With your arrogance, your ignorance and greed. Now here come the cuts and redundancy. Through the absolute indifference, the avarice, incompetence, your arrogance, your ignorance, your greed.
This is a sad story. It's one of those things that just really ticks you off. And you wonder how people can be cruel and angry and be who they are. And the story in Florida, and I had heard about this in the past, and it's one of those things that you just fell off the radar. There was a guy who, a mentally ill Florida inmate, guy who was locked up, with pretty severe mental illness. Evidently, he had, what's the nice way of putting it? He had gone all over himself and all over his cell and refused to clean it up. And obviously, this is something that made the prison guards very unhappy at the Dade Correctional Institution. So they took him and they put him into a scalding hot shower. And you go, how hot can water be in a shower head? Evidently, they left him in this shower for over an hour, where he was screaming, begging for forgiveness, promising he'd never do anything ever again. And when they went back for him an hour later, he was found face up, and the medical examiners said that his skin was burned so badly it had shriveled away from his body, a condition that they call slippage. So he had been scalded by this hot water so badly that the skin just kind of shriveled up off of his body, kind of like he was boiled. And what's interesting about this is, well, nobody seems to be being held accountable. The authorities, according to reports, don't really seem to care. The exact cause of death not determined, therefore nobody being charged, and there doesn't seem to be a rush to figure it out. And I look at this and you go, okay, well, this is probably not the most upstanding citizen we've got, but is it somebody that deserves to be boiled alive in a hot shower? Is it someone who, and look, I understand the anger. I understand being ticked off. I got to be honest. I wouldn't be thrilled at someone defecating all over themselves in their cell and having to clean it up. Would not be thrilled with that. But at some point, rational, sane voices have to prevail. The guy had a history of mental illness. And you got to wonder, whoever would do this, you got to wonder if they've got some type of mental illness. And speaking of mental illness, the vice chairman of the Mississippi Tea Party was one of three men arrested. And this is one of those you got to be kidding me. This makes really no sense. This is what happens when you get rank amateurs deciding that they're going to run an operative political underhanded scheme. We're going to show them. We're going to get that senator, Mississippi Senator, Republican Senator Thad Cochran. Evidently, his wife has been in a nursing home since 2000. Now, I don't understand the thought here, and I guess I'm giving too much credit. I think I'm giving too much credit to the Tea Party people, and I think I do need to give them some semblance of having a brain, but I don't know how this is going to work out. So bear with me. Evidently, these three idiots, an attorney, a guy named Mark Mayfield, who was charged with conspiracy, a gym teacher named Richard Sager, and another guy named John Mary. They were arrested. Mary wasn't arrested because I guess he's really, really sick. So they didn't take him into custody. They did charge him. But the gym teacher was charged with felony tampering with evidence. Turns out these three rocket scientists tried to sneak into the nursing home where Thad Cochran's wife has been admitted. I guess she's been there since 2000. She's suffering from dementia. A horrible, horrible thing. And my heart and my thought goes out to this senator, even if he is a Republican. It's a horrible killer of a disease. But these three rocket scientists, one of which decided he was going to try to help Cochran's opponent, who was a former conservative talk show host. So you got to wonder how many brains are there. But the three geniuses thought that they would go in and they would photograph this Thad Cochran's wife, who is suffering from dementia in a nursing home. And I'm trying to figure out how this was going to play out. They were going to get footage of this woman and use it to accuse Thad Cochran of having an affair while his wife was in the nursing home. I have no idea why they would want to sneak into a nursing home and get pictures of a woman in a nursing home. I think it's fair to say she's got enough problems. But these three rocket scientists thought it would be a great idea. I just don't know how you got the connection. How would you connect that he's having an affair when his wife... But it is what it is. So the guy who's the candidate running against Cochran says, well, I didn't have anything to do with it. And I would hope not. I would hope anybody running for a political office would have at least some shred of sense, not decency. Not decency. That's way too much to ask for. I'm simply asking for a little common sense. Explain to me why it matters. How is it that footage of this woman in a state of dementia sitting in a nursing home is going to prove adultery? I'm confused. But here's the thing. I sit here and I go, at some point, if we were a culture that didn't give a rat's behind about what people do in their bedrooms, this wouldn't even have been a thought in these twisted, demented nitwits' heads. Because what seems to be very important to them wouldn't be important to the rest of us. I don't care if Thad Cochran's having a tryst with another woman. Doesn't affect me in the slightest. What I'm concerned about, and I don't even care if what do they say about running campaigns? You hope your opponent's caught with a dead hooker or a live boy. Yeah. Again, the whole idea of people's personal lives shouldn't enter into this, and they shouldn't be put in a situation where they have to lie. But I just find it very interesting that these geniuses thought, hey, let's get pictures of this woman and prove nothing. Just insane. But I guess, this is why the Tea Party's popularity is dying off, and the polling has shown that not all of the cylinders are firing in place. And speaking of cylinders not all firing in place, did you know the Westboro Baptist Church is still doing their picketing? I thought with the crazy guy dying off, and I don't really, Fred Phelps, I guess his name was, I thought with him dying off and being cremated or whatever they did with him, and being disowned from the church and all of that, I thought the insanity would stop. Evidently not. Evidently, the Westboro Baptist Church is planning to picket Cher's concerts, and I'm not quite sure, why now. But they've got some flyers running around, making accusations about Sonny Bono being a twerp and Greg Allman being a drunk druggie, and other things about her son or daughter, or about, is it Chaz? I don't know what he goes. I don't know what. This is the thing with that. Started off as a man, or started off as a woman, right? Now a man. Yeah, that's it. Started off as a woman, now a man. So it's her son, Chaz. That's right. I'm not really up on this, so I'm just want to make sure I got it. So evidently they're going to picket the concerts by Cher, and I don't know that Cher really cares. And there was an interesting commentary done by the person who reported on it. Cher's camp not really saying. And I guess, hey, if you can, whatever you can do to gin up some more publicity. It just makes you wonder, though. Why is it we just can't mind our own damn business? And if you're going to use religion, at least use it some way decent. Quick break. Right back.
No matter to me, as long as we can live in harmony. Why can't we be friends?
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
During the audience, he issued another warning.
Nostro in confronto al creato.
Pope Francis calls on Christians to protect creation, or else.
We need to get over this angry hatredness and really turn to following the God that I know best in Christ and His love and leading us out of climate change.
Evangelical environmentalists organize to address climate change. CNN's chief says climate change is too boring to cover. Plus,
they are a spectacular sight.
Meet your newest national monument, Organ Pipes Desert Peaks in New Mexico.
All of those too boring stories straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Pat Sajak, the Wheel of Fortune host, spun out of control on Twitter this week. Sajak blasted environmentalists saying global warming alarmists are unpatriotic racists.
Unpatriotic racists. That makes no sense at all. Could I buy a clue? This is your Green News Report.
Wheel of Denial.
Okay, Desi Doyen, I'm noticing a religious theme to today's episode of the GNR. Am I correct?
Yes, you are, absolutely.
See, nothing gets by me. Very sharp.
You're very quick.
Yes.
We start with Pope Francis.
Who?
He says we have a moral obligation to address climate change and care for creation in a landmark catechesis.
A what?
It's called a catechesis. And that was this week before a massive crowd in Rome. Pope Francis said that Christians should be, quote, custodians of creation, and warned that failure to care for the planet risks dire consequences.
The Pope hates America. Press on.
Nostro in confronto al creato.
We must protect creation, because if we destroy creation, creation will destroy us. Never forget this.
Totally hates America.
Well, the Pope would disagree with you. His speech came on the heels of a week-long sustainability summit at the Vatican focused on finding ways for the Catholic Church to address the disproportionate impact of climate change on the global poor. And in the U.S., that concept is also gaining ground, with a growing number of evangelical organizations working on what they call creation care, trying to convince their fellow Christians to stop denying the science of climate change and instead address it and protect the environment. The Reverend Mitch Hescox, president of the Evangelical Environmental Network, told CNN this week that his goal is to get past political partisanship.
But I think that's one of the problems in America today is, and my job is to cross that bridge. You know, we don't want to beat up anybody, but we want to be the bridge builder that truly offers the love of Christ to help them to realize the serious impact and the serious nature of climate change.
Okay, that guy hates America too. The Evangelical Church and the Catholic Church both hate America. Great.
No, actually, I think they're trying to make sure that people pay attention to, God's creation.
Whatevs.
Now, again, that interview was on CNN, which has been roundly criticized for focusing on stories like the missing Malaysian airliner and failing to cover the threat of climate change. The president of CNN, Jeffrey Zucker, sparked quite a bit of controversy this week when he admitted at an event in New York that CNN does not cover climate change enough, but he essentially blamed viewers for being bored, saying, quote, "We haven't figured out how to engage the audience in that story in a meaningful way. When we do those stories, there does tend to be a tremendous amount of lack of interest on the audience's part."
Hey, Jeff Zucker, Brad Friedman, and Desi Doyen of the Green News Report are ready to come to CNN and liven things up a bit with some not boring at all green news. Give us a call.
Or alternatively, CNN loves to cover natural disasters, so maybe we should just wait until there are so many disasters that it interests Jeff Zucker.
Oh, so you're not saying it'd be a natural disaster if you and I were on CNN?
Certainly not.
Thank you. Okay.
Meanwhile, like the Pope, President Obama was also focused on good stewardship of the earth this week when he signed a proclamation formally designating nearly 500,000 acres of land in southern New Mexico as the new Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument.
More than 130 years ago, Billy the Kid took cover and literally left his mark, inscribing his name into what we now know as Outlaw Rock. You can see it today, and I want to make sure that future generations can see it as well. And all of it supports the local economy and jobs in the region. So we're not just preserving history. Outdoor recreation at parks and forests and other public lands brings in tourism dollars. I've preserved more than 3 million acres of public lands for future generations, and I am not finished. So
there goes Obama, big government taking over all our public lands. Somebody call Cliven Bundy.
Now, national monument status will ensure that future generations can also see the Native American petroglyphs in that national monument. Cattle will still be allowed to graze there, but all drilling and fracking will be prohibited.
Land grabber. For much more on those stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website, not CNN's, at greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help the Green News Report stay on the air until we are hired by CNN. Find us on the Facebook and follow us on the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been...
This is CNN.
No, this has been your Green News Report.
Where family values are more than slogans. The Rick Smith Show.
It's times like these you live and live again. It's times like these you learn to love again. It's times like these, time and time again.
Time like these. Yeah, times like, high unemployment rates. High unemployment rates. And no federal assistance. In fact, the Illinois Department of Employment Security, they just released some of their analysis of wage data. What they find? Well, no real big surprises. They found that 4 out of 5 Illinois workers, according to their report, 4 out of 5 Illinois workers were without wages 2 months after the close of the federal extension of benefits. It was supposed to help the long-term unemployed, until they found the next job. It was supposed to be there to, to fill that gap because the economy was so bad. So right now you're looking at the actual numbers, and the numbers point out 4 out of 5. Critics, they say, of the emergency unemployment compensation program contend that unemployment insurance benefits discourage individuals from working, and that ending the program would prompt people to go get jobs and accept employment offers because, they're desperate. Now they're desperate. If we can make desperate people, they'll take whatever. Maybe they'll take that buck-an-hour job or that loaf of bread for a day's work job. Now, according to the guy who's the director of the Illinois Department of Employment Security, a guy named Jay Rowell, he says this notion that temporary unemployment benefits provide people a reason not to return to work really needs to end because it's not supported by the data. He said economic conditions should determine when this safety net program ends, not an arbitrary date on a calendar. And that arbitrary date was just after Christmas. Merry Christmas. Ho, ho, ho. Little coal for you. In fact, our Republican friends, they raced home after the Christmas break, and not even coal. Not even coal to keep people warm in the wintertime. Talk about Scrooge? Yeah, and there he is. Scrooge in the big way. According to the report, President George Bush and Congress enacted the Emergency Unemployment Compensation Program in June of 2008 to provide additional weeks of federally funded unemployment insurance after individuals collected all available state benefits. Now, think about what states did. A lot of states, you look at North Carolina, you look at Florida, they went and they took it down from the normal 26 weeks, some down to 20, some down to as low as 13 weeks, cut it in half. And part of me thought it was, well, if we cut it down to 13 weeks, we'll make our fund solvent and put people on the federal program. Well, federal people said, well, screw you, you're getting nothing. And as this data analysis points out, at the time, the national unemployment rate was 5.6%, and the Illinois rate was 6.3%. They say following a series of 11 extensions, Congress determined that the emergency unemployment compensation would end on December 28th, 2013. When it did, they say the Illinois rate was 8.9%, and the national rate was 6.7%. They point out when the emergency unemployment compensation ended, 74,000 Illinois workers immediately lost their benefits. 1 month later, 64,000 workers lost their benefits, or 86% were without unemployment. February records showed just about the same as January, with 63,000 workers losing their job, or 82% of those still without employment. So you've got this situation where 80% of the people still don't have jobs. But here again, blind faith belief. If we make them desperate enough, if they're desperate enough, they'll go out and they'll find a job. And what we find out is, and this is another one of those bits of analysis, this time by Wonkblog. A guy named Matt O'Brien points out that someone who lost their job at the peak of the 2009 recession had a 30% chance of staying unemployed for an extended amount of time. And I remember, because I go back to this, I remember, people telling me, well, if I lost my job, I'd have a job just like that, and it'd be paying more than I'm making now. And I remember the one guy told me that I'd make more than I'm making now. I go, well, why don't you look for that job now? Which is kind of a stumper. Because I've had a number of people tell me, without a union here, we'd make more, or I could go get another job making more, or I could. Then why don't you? Am I missing something? Because anytime I've ever had the prospect of going to find a job that paid more money, I took it because it made sense. Just a thought. And there's never a good answer that comes back from that. The sad reality is what we've allowed to happen, though, is we've allowed the messengers, the Tom Corbetts, the Republicans, to say, well, the unemployed are lazy. I know people who've been off for months. In fact, I know a guy who's been off for 3 years. And he looks every day. The jobs just aren't there. And the thing is, you get into this cycle to where, if you're If you've been off for a while, if you've been unemployed and your resume has a gap, good luck, because nobody's even going to look at the resume, let alone going to give you the chance to be hired. Because I guess the theory is if nobody's wanted you all this time, why would we want you? Even if the economy has turned around a little bit, and it still hasn't. And I've said this from the beginning. I was not in favor of the 2008 extension of emergency unemployment benefits. Wasn't in favor of it. I said what we should be doing is having job training programs. Put people into job training programs. Don't extend unemployment. Do a lot like we do with the TAA, the Trade Adjustment Assistance. Put people into training programs. Okay, you can't find a job in the private sector. You can't, and we're not going to be employer of the last resort like I think we should be. Put you into training programs. We're going to put you into community college, technical schools, whatever. And while you're going to attain these skills, we're going to pay you. That to me seems rational and reasonable. Maybe even put you into a union apprenticeship program where they'll pay you. But those are just ideas that are just crazy talk. It's just insanity. Nobody would really do that, would they? You know, that just makes sense. And we don't like making sense. We don't like the idea of government actually doing something for the betterment of society. That would be horrible. It'd be against everything that the wealth class has spent a couple of generations messaging around. It would undo things, and that would be bad. So it's easier just to point fingers and demonize and say, you know, those lazy people won't go get jobs. And I keep telling my employed friends, if you push all of those lazy people into your job field, what happens to your wage? Just a thought. There's a lot of that stuff we've got to think about. But here again, the unemployment extension has not happened, and here we are already moving into June. And you think about all of those people, 80% of the people in Illinois still haven't found a job. What have they done? You gotta wonder. You gotta wonder what other social safety net programs have taken a beating because of it. Quick break. Right back after this.
Progress. In the 2012 elections, Republicans cast themselves as budget balancers by promising to whack welfare programs for the poor, snarling that such people are takers and moochers. Such vindictive sourness didn't play too well with voters, and Republicans now seem to have learned their lesson. Oh, they're still going after food stamps, school lunches, etc., with a vengeance, but this time with a gentle, even loving tone. The GOP's official message massagers now have their members saying that they want to, quote, help the poor by eliminating those programs, referring to them as soulless giveaways that sap their initiative and tether them to the cold, uncaring hand of government. The message is, we're doing this for the poor people's own good. Their chief budgeteer, Representative Paul Ryan, trotted out this theme at a recent right-wing rally, condemning school lunches as unloving Obama fare plopped on plates by unsmiling cafeteria personnel. What they're offering people is a full stomach and an empty soul, he oozed. If that doesn't make you gag, try another subsidized lunch program that tender-hearted GOP budget whackers never mention, much less demand that it be eliminated. It's the tax subsidy for corporate meals, drinks, and entertainment. Multimillionaire CEOs can go whining and dining on your and my dime, writing off their high-dollar lunches, cocktails, dinners, and club hopping as a business expense. And expensive it is for us taxpayers. This subsidy adds up to more than $12 billion a year. And that doesn't count the human cost of executive initiative that is sapped by this giveaway, and the lack of love a CEO feels from being dependent on unsmiling taxpayers. This is Jim Hightower saying we ought to be subsidizing healthy meals for poor people, especially school kids, but not a dime for fat cat CEOs dining out at Chez Gourmand.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's populist take on what the powers that be are up to. Find out more at hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-888-520-RICK. That's 1-888-520-7425. The man who sends the investor class diving for their tax shelters. Rick Smith.
The rich pay too much taxes, the poor get way too much. Instead of schools, build prisons and lock the children up. We won't believe those lies again, because God is a Republican. And welfare was a big mistake. It's all the hippies' fault. What were they smoking? Trying to help folks out.
Yeah, what were they smoking? What were they wanting to help somebody? Help? Really? Do we do that anymore? Not so much. We just worry about who we pray to and who we invite into our bedrooms, and that's the important stuff, Rick. Don't you know? That's what God cares about, and He doesn't like others. And this didn't take long. I've been waiting. I've been. You knew this was going to happen soon. Remember the Greece, New York case, the Supreme Court case? It said, that prayer thing. That's okay. Don't worry about it. You can do the Linda Thompson. You can open up all of your city meetings with a prayer. And they did put in some things where you have to, you can't have way out crazy prayers. You can't have government promoting one religion over another. You can't do that stuff. This idea that there's just openness. You're not excluding religion, but you're not promoting it either. Well, county officials in Virginia, evidently, the way it looks, have violated the Constitution. They are saying that, well, there are only certain prayers that are going to be allowed, and it's not going to be those Muslims. So the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, they sent a letter to the Chesterfield County Board of Supervisors, which had limited opening prayers to ordained leaders of monotheistic religions. So I guess no Pastafarians, I guess no Church of Satan, and certainly no Muslims. According to the Reverend Barry W. Lynn, Executive Director for Americans United for Separation of Church and State, he said the First Amendment requires governing bodies to allow everyone the chance to deliver prayers before official meetings. If they don't, then what they're doing is unconstitutional. So this isn't going to take long. It's going to be what it's going to be, another Supreme Court case, and it's more of these ideologues pushing their beliefs on everybody else. And for me, I keep going, it was a lot better when you just kept it to yourself and not made a big stink about this stuff. And if the Pastafarian wants to get up and make a statement, let him. Now, the Satanist, you kind of got to wonder. And I actually know a self-described member of the Church of Satan, Anton LaVey's group. But if you look at the decision by Justice Kennedy, the idea of having a Church of Satan prayer, as long as it is something that is held by the person who wants to do it. It's something that they believe. It's something that is sincerely held. Now, there was a situation where, a guy wanted to open up the town prayer the guy's name's Chaz Stevens. He's a Florida guy, a self-described Satanist. He evidently wrote to the city of Deerfield Beach, said he'd like to give the prayer. I'd love to do it at the next prayer meeting, and he even offered what the prayer might be. He wrote, "Oh, mighty Lord Satan, teach us to become strong and wise. Teach us to vanquish the enemies of our freedom and well-being." Okay, well, I don't agree with it, but okay, let him have his piece. Well, they're not going to. And they may have a leg to stand on because, according to him, it's, he just wants to push the bounds. According to the decision, it has to be something, as I said, has to be sincerely held. Now, if you have a true Satanist who wants to come and give the prayer, constitutionally, I don't know how you preclude them from doing that in a constitutional realm. And have we opened up Pandora's box? Because at some point, it's going to happen. At some point, the court's going to have to rule on this, and it makes me wonder how schizophrenic our court's going to get and what kind of gymnastic moves they're going to have to put themselves into to get out of this. Which is why when you start doing this stuff, making new law out of whole cloth and just kind of winging it, so much for balls and strikes, it kind of makes you wonder, what exactly are we doing? What exactly is the point to all of this? And I find it very interesting. And it will be something well worth watching. You knew this was going to happen. On a different note, I've been saying all along, Darrell Issa chafed in the behind. Well, evidently, Darrell, he has basically blown up the House Republicans' special committee on Benghazi. Actually discussed a memo that, according to ABC News, is still classified. It's a State Department email that claims one of the first responses the White House had after the Benghazi attack was to contact YouTube and to, warn, threaten, maybe suggest heavily that there might be ramifications if they allowed the posting of any anti-Islamic videos. This is coming from Issa. The memo evidently suggests that even as the attack was still underway, before the CIA began the process of compiling talking points, the White House believed it was a retaliation to a controversial video. And this is basically, well, it's not basically, it's exactly what the White House said happened. It's exactly their position. Maybe it was wrong, who knows, but it's exactly their position. And my question is if Issa has had this all along, has ginned up this whole scandal all along, when do we start investigating Issa? When do we start investigating him for wasting federal resources? And look, I'm angry and broken up about what happened in Benghazi as well. But why all this sudden feigned outrage when, someone sent me an email saying during the Bush years, 60 people who worked in our embassies and consulates around the world were killed, 60 of them. And I had to go back and look at the dates and try and find news stories for each of them, which most didn't have, in places that we don't even know of. So now they're going to feign the outrage now. Now they're going to have hearings and want scandal. Yet during the Bush years, nothing, not a peep. Really? Are you kidding me? And the answer is no, they're not kidding. They can do this with a straight face because they know it's all just a game. It's all a bunch of BS. It's political pandering at its worst. And they're experts at it. It's just that simple. Quick break. Right back with Hour 3. Stick around.
never change your mind. Don't think before you die. Whoa, think before you die.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
It's the Rick Smith Show on Country Gold Radio, WIOO Carlisle and WEEO Shippensburg.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Staffing shortages and funding shortages and pressure to do more with less is at the heart of the VA long wait times for veterans to get medical care. That's according to the union that represents VA workers. Marilyn Park is legislative director for the American Federation of Government Employees.
I think it's getting worse as the VA keeps expecting the front providers and their support personnel to be doing more with less. It really is the root cause of the problem. And scheduling clerks who we represent who keep telling us consistently we don't have appointments. Now, they're not cooking the books, but they're just telling us what it's like on the front lines every day to be not having enough provider appointments to fill, to put veterans into. And then we have the providers on the other end saying we just keep being told to take thousands and thousands of more patients, hundreds of each provider. VA puts on paper and keep taking them because they won't hire, and when they do hire, people leave because of very, very difficult working conditions.
AFGE wants a reallocation of resources to frontline caregivers and support staff at the VA so they have the resources to properly care for military veterans. McDonald's workers and their supporters were back at Hamburglar HQ in Illinois Thursday, a day after more than 100 were arrested as they took their fight for $15 an hour and a union to the company's shareholders meeting. Devontae Yates was one of the McDonald's workers arrested. He describes how it felt to be met with riot police instead of respectful dialogue with McDonald's management.
For me, I felt like, in a way, hurt because it's like, instead of listening to the people who make your company, instead of listening to, individuals who work for you, you have riot cops outside ready to kick us off the property. To me, it's like, there's things you don't even really care what we have to say, It's like, you hurry up and get off my property, they're a nuisance. But I don't think that's right because we're workers. We make your company thrive. We made you that $5.6 billion profit. The least you can do is just hear us out.
Despite being arrested Wednesday, Devontae and the other McDonald's workers were right back at McDonald's headquarters again Thursday.
Me being arrested the day before and coming back, to me it just shows them like, you can do whatever you want to do. You can put whatever you want to put in my way, any obstacle. We're going to cross them, and we're going to keep fighting, and we're going to keep doing what we have to do. You can lock us up as many times as you want. You can have riot cops anywhere you want. It's not going to stop us because we know what we want. We know what we're worth, and we're going to keep fighting for it.
The Chicago Teachers Union is out with a report analyzing the impact of 50 school closings in Chicago a year after the city's Board of Education voted to close the schools. The union says promises of millions of dollars in aid to schools that took students from the closed schools were hollow in many cases and only partially fulfilled in others. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Monday morning feels so bad. Everybody seems to connect me. Coming Tuesday, I feel better. Even my old man looks good. This Wednesday, it's no so slow. Thursday, I don't know. I got Friday on my mind.
Yes, Friday. Thank goodness it is Friday, our future Friday. What's tomorrow going to look like? That's why I've got our good friend Isaiah Poole, online editor over at the Campaign for America's Future, to talk about our future Friday. Isaiah, thanks for being here, man.
My pleasure.
So yesterday you guys had a huge conference, the New Populism Conference. I had Elizabeth Warren show up, had Keith Ellison show up. Tell me about it.
It was a fantastic day. Senator Elizabeth Warren was our keynote speaker, and she really laid out, you really ought to go to our website, ourfuture.org/the New Populism Conference. And on that page, at the top of the page now, is the video of Elizabeth Warren's speech, as well as the a full video of the entire conference that you can watch. But I tell you, Warren was really laid down the hammer, I think, in terms of defining what we're about. I mean, she talked about how the rules have been rigged against the middle class, against working people, and she was pretty clear on the fact that, you know, the only way to fight this is to fight this, and to reassert the values that animate us as working people.
And
it was a great moment, I think.
Well, I mean, for me, I think we're seeing some of that. I think you're seeing these fast food workers out in the streets. We're seeing in Pittsburgh this week, you saw steel workers and the community saying, hey, save our jobs. I think you're finally starting to see people spring awake. So this is a perfect time for this kind of a conference and a call for what the future is going to look like, what tomorrow looks like, because we've tried conservative ideology. We've tried the tax breaks for the billionaires. We've tried the tax breaks for big corporations. We've tried insane free trade policy, and none of it has seemed to work.
None of it has worked. I think it's becoming very clear that none of it has worked. What I personally find fascinating is that even some poor parts of the conservative movement are realizing that they're having to recalibrate. At the same time that our conference is going on, the American Enterprise Institute was also doing a conference. The American Enterprise Institute is a right-wing think tank, and amid all of the talk of income inequality, amid all of what you talked about, the fast food worker strike, the push for a minimum wage around the country, they have stepped back and said, well, we need to figure out how to talk about conservative values in a way that sort of co-opts this rage about how the system has failed to work for common people. And so they're trying to now figure out, how do we take some of the populist language? How do we say that we are for working people at the same time pursuing the very policies that they wanted to pursue to benefit they want to benefit the 1% without saying that they're benefiting the 1%. I mean, that's been the game. And but you know, one of the speakers at that particular conference said, well, we need to talk less about job creators and about what was the phrase, about workers, and talk more about workers and talk less about job creators. So there might be, at least in some corners of the conservative movement, a little bit of a rhetorical shift, if not an actual policy shift.
Yeah, because I've been saying for the longest time that change had to happen, because as soon as we started talking about the job creators on both sides of the aisle, workers lost, because then the focus was solely on how do we only help the very wealthy? How do we only help these big corporations? And, you know, look, I know a lot of small business owners are not the very wealthy and they're not big corporations, but they're working people like anybody else. They're just trying to make it to the next paycheck. And I consider them as part of that working class, because without a working class with disposable income, sorry, small business owners, you don't exist either.
And in fact, a lot of the small businesses that you're talking about are, in fact, in many cases, the actual job creators. It's not the big corporations that are able to walk into one of the congressional office buildings and essentially write legislation, writing for themselves tax cuts and regulation cuts. The real action in terms of job creation is on Main Street and with Main Street businesses. And these are guys who, as you said, are on both sides of the fence. They are both people who are running a business, but they are also hard. They work 40, 50, 60 hours a week themselves to keep their business going. So they understand both sides of the equation. I've talked to some of these small business owners, and you know, when you talk to a lot of these guys face to face, it's a very different conversation from the kind of conversation you have with, for example, the head of the Cinnabon chain was on Bloomberg this morning talking about why she opposes an increase in the minimum wage. Because it's going to, hurt the franchisees. Well, the president of Cinnabon, I don't know what her salary is, but you can be sure it's a high six-figure salary, if not a seven-figure salary.
But does it actually hurt and we've had these conversations before, but does it actually hurt the small businesses? Does it hurt the franchisees, or does it help them by having employees who can actually purchase the products that they're making?
Well, when you raise the floor, everybody benefits. The businesses benefit because there's more disposable income. Survey after survey, study after study shows that the only arguments that you get that oppose that are arguments that are essentially paid for by folks like the National Restaurant Association.
The Cinnabon people.
Exactly.
Or the pizza, the Papa John's guy.
Exactly, or the McDonald's folks. But, the objective surveys, including one, you're in Pennsylvania. There's a famous study of what happened when the minimum wage increased on one side of the New Jersey-Pennsylvania border, and it didn't increase on the other side. And they looked at fast food restaurants that were right on the border, and there was no difference.
Of course not. If you're a franchisee, you're going to up and move your building across the border? Of course not. But people like to make you think, oh yeah, they're that mobile. And the other argument you get is, well, then those jobs will go overseas. Because if you remember, and someone threw this back at me the other night, if you remember, Wendy's was actually trying to do their drive-through windows from India.
I had not heard that story, but it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, because I had talked about it a couple of years ago. Wendy's was actually trying to outsource their order takers to India. Now they're trying to do it with technology, but here's the thing, and this is where I retort back. They're going to do it anyway. $7.25 is more than zero. And unless you're willing to work for free or to pay them to work for them, they're going to do it anyway. Mechanization and all of this computerization is going forward with or without an increase in the minimum wage.
So what we need to do then is, rather than suffer under the extortion, because this is like, to me, this is no different when businesses make these arguments. It's no difference from pointing a gun to the head of the worker and saying, you do as I say or we're going to pull the trigger. And we don't stand up for that bullying. And this is kind of what we were talking about at the conference, the New Populism Conference, was exactly that. We stand up to the bullies in the corporate class, in the oligarch class, and say no more. We can build a society and build a functioning economy based on paying workers a living wage so that they can feed and clothe and house their families, and reward workers for the productivity that they bring to the table. We can do that. And we shouldn't accept the argument that the only people who deserve the rewards of a growing economy are the people at the very top of the income scale.
Well, don't you know, Isaiah, those are the people who work hard, though. We can't take from the people who work hard. Those people who sit in the corner office.
But I think, but this is not only an economic crisis, but it's also a moral crisis. And one of the great, if you go to our site, listen to the last, I would say, 45 or 50 minutes from Reverend William Barber, who's been leading the Moral Mondays movement in North Carolina, and he's working to try to spread that movement around the country now. And he lays out the moral case for what we're doing here with empowering workers, making sure that people at the who are working people have an equitable share in the wealth of this country. It's a fundamental moral principle, and it is not, in his view, a conservative versus liberal thing. It's moral versus immoral. It is not fair. It is not right for people to work 40, 45, 50, 60 hours a week and not be properly paid for what they contribute. It's just not right.
I'm right there with you. But, you listen to the right wing and, well, if, in fact, the CEO of McDonald's I talked about earlier was saying that, we pay competitive wages because we've gotten into this mentality that, wow, that's competitive wages because that's how little folks are worth. And I keep saying, well, factory workers 100 years ago didn't make squat either. They, by organizing, by having the right to join and form unions, they raised that stuff up. So shouldn't we be making organizing, being able to join a union and form a union, shouldn't we make that almost a civil right?
We should make that a civil right. And it used to be a civil right. Or in effect a civil right. Roosevelt, one of the great accomplishments of FDR was, in fact, elevating the strength of the union movement legislatively, legally, so that then workers could band together and be on an equal footing with corporations, with business people. That formula worked for decades until conservatives dismantled it.
Well, it worked for working people. It didn't work for the billionaires as much. They didn't get to have it all. They got to have a lot, but they didn't get to have it all.
They got to have a lot, and what they usually got in a well-managed business was very good productive workers. They got good returns on their investment. They got goods that were made in the United States that people had pride in, and money then circulating through the American economy in ways that it doesn't circulate through the economy now. And they get the people at the top get to buy 2 Bentleys. They don't get to buy 3, but they get 2.
Yeah, see, that's just not enough. It's not enough to have 7 houses. We want 8. It's not enough to have 8. We want 9. See, it never gets to be enough at the top. And I've used the quote from the guy who was the CEO of Caterpillar a number of times. Who said it's never enough. Sorry, and we're going to continue every chance we get to steal back wages and benefits because the profits are never enough. We've got to be striving for more, and we got to be cutting costs, and that means labor. And this is why, and I've said this before. The original Wagner Act, the original National Labor Relations Act, gave employers absolutely no rights whatsoever. There is not one single syllable in that law that gives any rights to employers because they understood employers had all the rights to begin with. This was to give workers a little bit, a sliver of hope in being able to negotiate.
The ray of hope is that we've been here before, and Bob Borisov, my boss, did a really good job of just sort of laying out the history of populism in the United States. And we could go back to the 1800s, where the oligarchs were saying the same kind of thing that they're saying today, and there was a popular uprising. And the interesting thing about that popular uprising was that they had to go. They went after business. They went after the oligarchs, and they went after the fact. They didn't go. They realized that they had to take back government from the oligarchs and use it as an instrument of the people, and stop it from being solely an instrument of the oligarchs. We have the difference between what I would call the new progressive populism and the populism that people saw in the Tea Party movement is who gets to control the government.
And that's what we've seen a lot of the ALEC legislation around is consolidating power at the state level and making sure that, like here in Pennsylvania, for instance, one of the state reps proposed a piece of legislation that said no community, no township, no subdivision can pass any paid leave ordinance whatsoever. Has to be done at the state level, can't be done anywhere else but at the state level. And these are from people who say we believe in local control and smaller, less intrusive government. The hypocrisy, well, abound. This is what they've done. They've while demonizing government, have consolidated government's power.
They've while saying that they want to take government off the backs of people, they've put it in their pockets. And what we have to do is expose it every time it happens. The Tea Party populism, much of that Tea Party populism was basically oligarch seizing control of government, dressed up in the garb of populism. So it was not true populism. And I think the more people realize that, the more that we can have a rational conversation about how we can take the government back, take our democracy back, and then let's have a conversation about how we make things work for working people. How we can have an economy where, if you get yourself educated, if you get a high school or a college degree, you can get a good job, you're paid a decent wage, and you can support a family. To do those basic things.
Like my grandparents' generation did. Let me ask you a last line of questioning. Today I got a clip of Ben Carson. I'm sure you know who Ben Carson is.
Yes.
He was on The View, which I never watched, but someone sent me a clip of him on The View talking about how we need to re-educate people to what America is. And I thought we tried that with some camps in the past. Maybe we'll have some re-education camps up again in the near future. But I found it interesting that he was talking about people on welfare. And again, that looking down on people on welfare. Yet when you find out his past, his mother, like mine, at times had to ask for help, had to get food stamps, had to get housing assistance, had to get all of the things that he is now railing about and against. You find that odd?
I find that absolutely odd. Here's what I find even more troubling about people like Ben Carson. One of his issues is that he believes that we ought to stop talking about race. That that whatever situations African Americans find themselves in is pretty much their own fault, and we ought to just get over this idea that there is residual effects of our racist past that we need to just get over. Next week, the Economic Policy Institute is going to be releasing, well, actually it's not the Economic Policy, the Center for Economic Policy Research that just put out a study that says that basically 55% of African American college graduates in today's economy are ending up in jobs that don't require a college degree.
Yep. 55%.
That says that even if, and among the general population, it's about 45%. So it's bad enough that we have an economy in which people are graduating from college and are ending up driving cabs or working at fast food restaurants or doing other things which have little or no relationship to their college degree, simply because we're not producing the jobs, the broad sweep of jobs that would accommodate that. But to say to an African American person who is again has done what we've told him to do, graduated from high school, graduated from college, he has that degree, and yet we do not have a job at the end of that process for him that comes close to being commensurate with that degree. And then we have the nerve to say that is that person's fault because we have a fundamentally dysfunctional economy. I mean, cut me a break.
Yeah,
I mean, the next time Paul Ryan starts talking about the culture in African American communities, somebody should just simply sit them down and say, there are a lot of folk who they're.
Can't we just smack him?
I didn't want to say smack.
Can't you just smack him? I mean, because what does he know? What does he know about it? The only time I think he's ever been in a poor urban setting is when he tried to force his way in to wash some pots and pans that didn't need to be washed.
Right. But here's the thing: we need to have the conversation about how to get this economy working again, how to get our trade policies right, so we're not exporting all of our jobs overseas. Get our tax policies right, so that that corporations are not parking all of their money in tax havens. They should instead, a dollar that is earned in the United States by a corporation should be taxed just like a dollar that I earn is taxed.
Absolutely.
And we need to talk about investing in the United States in a program that creates jobs and puts the economy back on a fair footing for ordinary people. That's what the new populism is about.
And if you want to take a look at the conference, ourfuture.org/the new populism conference, we've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on our good friend Isaiah Poole's name and take you right there. Isaiah, I appreciate you taking time for us. Enjoy the holiday weekend.
You do the same.
Thanks so much. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Say the USA is drowning in grafted lies. Say the USA have resumed the ties it binds. Stop taking all our money and shipping it offshore. Do the job you're elected for.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
Time for the world in 2 minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, reporting for Talk Radio News Service at the United Nations. By the end of Memorial Day weekend, 4 countries will hold key presidential votes. And to give each a fair share of attention, I've divvied up the next 90 seconds relative to their population. Ukraine votes Sunday, and a deeply religious, pro-European integration chocolate tycoon is a clear favorite to win. Pedro Poroshenko has revolutionary chops and government experience without the baggage of having to rule or make tough decisions during Ukraine's current crisis. And that crisis is the real wild card here. Can the new Ukrainian government pull off a nationwide vote? And how will Russia respond? In Colombia, incumbent President Juan Manuel Santos is a champion of negotiations to reintegrate the FARC rebel group into political society. But he faces stiff competition from Oscar Zuluaga, who opposes the ongoing talks. FARC violence has claimed more than 100,000 lives since the 1960s, and ending that bloodshed is a national priority. But miscalculating the public's appetite for rebel reconciliation could cost Santos his job. And in Egypt, the leader of last year's coup against Muslim Brotherhood President Mohamed Morsi, that's Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, is a lock for the country's top job. Justice has been harsh in Egypt since that coup. Look no further than the 1,200 death sentences handed to Muslim Brotherhood supporters recently. And Sisi is of the mindset that nixing government threats is key to prosperity. Egypt certainly needs to bring back tourists and foreign investment dollars to stay afloat, but it's unclear how many rights abuses foreign capitals will put up with in betting on the Arab world's largest democracy. And finally, Lithuania. Well, that was their national anthem at the top of the show. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, Visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Yes, more news. Yeah, more news. I'm stuck on the Ben Carson thing on The View. The clip I got, someone sent me, and it was nice of them to send me this stuff. But the clip I got of Ben Carson saying we need to re-educate people just kind of freaks me out. That whole, those welfare people kind of thing just kind of makes me uneasy, especially from a guy who, his mother was on welfare too, like mine. And instead, looking backwards, pointing down, I don't know, just very, very odd to me. Anyway, let's find out what's going on in Washington, D.C. I'm sure Washington is clearing out the Friday before Memorial Day weekend, but Victoria Jones still there. Victoria, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, I'm here. I'll be here when when the balloon goes up. I'll be here.
You're gonna hold down the fort, are you?
Yes, absolutely. They're clearing out. They're like rats. They're like roaches. They are running for the hills. It's great. It's going to be a great weekend in D.C., I'll tell you.
I love when nobody is in D.C. because there are lots of things to look at, lots of things to kind of do, even when most of the city is shut down.
Oh, it's fantastic. I mean, yes, there's tourists in D.C. right now, but they're nice. Tourists are nice. I like tourists.
Yeah, because you can tell them where to go.
You can, very politely.
Yeah, because they're always asking you where to go.
They are.
Yeah, very, very nice. So big news in D.C., I guess, today. Obama has nominated Julian Castro to be the head of HUD.
That's right. The 39-year-old mayor of San Antonio and rising star in the Democratic Party, Julian Castro. President Obama's nominated him to be the new secretary of Housing and Urban Development. And this is very interesting. Of course, he's a young member of the Democratic Party. He gave a keynote at the Democratic National Convention. Very charismatic speaker, very bright guy, somebody who is even seen as a possible running mate for Hillary Clinton should she decide to run in 2016. That may be putting the cart before the horse, but you never know these days.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting position. And then there is, of course, a current HUD secretary, Sean Donovan, who's a guy who's been around for a long time. And he will be going, again, if they're all confirmed, to be the director of the Office of Management and Budget. And that's not the job that's being talked about much today, but actually, even though that's a job that has a pretty low profile, that's the job that is key in shaping President Obama's legacy. That's the one that has to do with federal regulations. That's the job that's really got quite a lot of power.
Interesting.
Again, if you get confirmed, oh yeah, Office of Management and Budget, quite an important job. I mean, there's things you can do. You can dig into EPA regulations. OMB is reviewing the draft standards on carbon dioxide emissions, the long-pending executive order banning LGBT discrimination among federal contractors. OMB is looking at that, things like that.
So a big position. So actually a step up for him, and Castro will come in if he gets confirmed. And I guess these are big ifs because almost nothing seems to be getting confirmed.
That's right. Almost nothing seems to be getting confirmed, but there is some hope. I mean, there may be tough confirmation hearings in the Senate, but since Harry Reid unilaterally changed the filibuster rules and thereby ground the Senate to a halt and brought probably the worst Senate relationships we've ever seen ever in the history of the human world, you can now confirm people with 51 votes. So they probably will get confirmed, even if Rand Paul does a filibuster.
Well, that's good. I mean, at some point you've got to take the bull by the horns because and looking at the judicial appointments that he's made over the years, the courts. You read report after report that the courts are just starving for people, and the backlogs are amazing. And I guess that's part of the plan, right? So everything screeches to a halt.
That's exactly what Harry Reid says. The idea is to slow down President Obama's agenda slower than a walk and to basically grind it to a halt so that he can't get anything done. In other words, you couldn't win at the ballot box. Well, you'll win this way.
Yeah. But I guess they just couldn't slow it down enough. Where here in Pennsylvania, they ruled unconstitutional the ban on same-sex marriage, which has a number of my really hyper-religious, super right-wing conservative friends about to jump. I mean, they're on the ledge, looking over into the abyss, going, "I can't take it anymore."
And what do they think that these newly gaily married people are going to do to them?
Well, you do know it is the end of the sanctity of their marriage. You do know that, right?
Yeah, because it's going to do what to their own marriages.
Well, you never get to that point. It's just ruining it because the children. What will the children think, Victoria?
Yes. They'll probably just ask for another Nintendo.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what it is, and what I find interesting is, I think I've told you this before. I had a friend who he gave me that whole sanctity of marriage nonsense, while he had a girlfriend and a child up in Massachusetts that his wife and 2 kids back in Pennsylvania didn't know about, but those people on that little box in the corner of the diner, that little TV box, they were going to ruin his marriage.
No, you didn't tell me that. I love that.
Oh, it was a beautiful story. It was about 10 or 12 years ago, where I used to drive we used to run together when I was driving a truck, and we would stop for like dinner in Connecticut, and it came on TV, and he was just losing his mind. You're going to ruin the sanctity of my marriage, going to destroy the country, blah blah blah. And I just looked to him. I said, at what point do you think these people are going to do anything that your girlfriend and kid aren't going to do to your marriage? And he just stopped, and it didn't really dawn on him until I mentioned it, and then he didn't talk to me about it anymore.
He really? But did he actually get it? I mean, he did get it, presumably, did he?
He did get that. He did get that the girlfriend and the kid were not good for his marriage. He did get that.
Yes,
but I'm sure he still believed the other part of it as well.
Yes.
Which is just priceless. And it's one of those things you just never forget.
It's interesting. I mean, I understand from a religious point of view, if your religion has in its scripture that you can't do this, then okay, then in your religion you can't do this.
Right.
But that doesn't mean to say that the state can't do it.
And this isn't religion, and this is what I keep trying to tell my religious friends. This is constitutional. This is if you have a right that people have in public with their constitution, a legal contract, it should be the same to everyone. When I got divorced a number of years back, it wasn't the religious contract that I had a very difficult time getting out of. It was that legal contract that split up half of my stuff and the good half that I lost.
Right, those albums.
Yeah, all that stuff that I could never find again because of her.
Never.
Yeah, well, both our faults. Anyway, let's move on. NSA, defense and drones. The NSA thing, I've got to be honest with you, I'm not all that thrilled with what's come out of this.
Well, and neither are privacy advocates and neither are industry advocates. They feel that what happened with the NSA bill, the USA Freedom Act, that was voted on yesterday in the House, that basically this bill passed out of the Judiciary Committee first, then it passed out of the Intelligence Committee, which was actually a surprise to everybody, but it did. And then the White House sidled up to the House leadership and said, hey, we'd like to make some changes. And so they did a deal, and they watered it down. And what they watered down was a bill that was going to effectively really crack down on the NSA's collection of bulk phone data.
Okay.
And what they've done is they have watered it down so that they've created loopholes so that the NSA, under some circumstances, and it's always elastic, isn't it? How long is a piece of string?
Right.
The NSA will be able to collect bulk phone data.
Nice. And as I was talking about this yesterday with Bob, I go, I have some of my younger friends who, people under 30, who they don't seem to care about this all that much. They actually believe the NSA is listening to everything. They believe somebody's watching everything that they tweet and type, and they think everything is public, and actually that there's nothing that is private. So to the younger under 30 crowd, it seems to be, well, who cares? We think that's the way it is anyway. But for someone like me who kind of values privacy a little bit and has this illusion that they're not watching everything, and that this little cell phone that I carry around they can't flip on anytime they want, I still cling to that hope that there's some bit of privacy left.
This is what's so profoundly depressing, is that, and I'm sure the government knows that for the millennials, they already know that they've lost. They already know that they have no privacy. I mean, if they were really badly violated, I'm sure they'd feel violated to be very upset. But they basically know that they've lost. I feel like you. I feel intensely about my privacy. But I don't believe I've got any, partly because I've already had a Secret Service background check. I've got the FBI database. I know they've got me. They've got me backwards, forwards, and upside down.
Yeah, and I know that the TSA has all of that stuff of mine as well, because I had to go through a terror risk assessment, and I had to have them tell me that I'm not a terrorist.
Oh, dear me, they've got you, haven't they? Yeah.
And the thing is, I had to pay for all that. That's what's infuriating. It's bad enough when they're paying for it, but when it's like you put in your own kick me sign on your backside.
It's just basically wrong, and I think what I'd like millennials who are listening to think about here is that yes, it may be that we've given up a lot of our privacy, but they're stealing it from us. There's a difference between choosing to give it up and them stealing it from us.
Yep.
And that's what they're doing.
Yeah, that's just frustrating. On the drone ends, what's going on with the drones?
Well, what's going on with the drones is that David Barron, who's a Harvard law professor and used to work at the Department of Justice, authored, well, we don't know how many memos saying that, hey, it's cool for us to launch lethal drone strikes and kill Americans on foreign soil, we presume foreign soil, and it's cool to do that. You can do that. And
well, they shouldn't, Victoria. They shouldn't be on foreign soil.
Well, there you go. That maybe that was the reason.
Solved.
Because we haven't seen all those memos, and the Senate just confirmed him to be a federal court judge.
Oh, that's beautiful. That is beautiful. Nice.
Yeah.
Well, again, that I guess the ship has sailed, and we're just watching it from the shore, huh?
Well, Rand Paul was going to mount a filibuster, and there was an end run done on him by the White House, which produced a couple of memos, or one memo maybe. It said it was going to produce it. I don't even know if they've produced it yet. But he's apparently authored several more memos, which they have not produced, and which the White House hasn't admitted that he's written.
Speaking of memos, did you see the memo that Darrell Issa, whose rear is a little chafed from having Benghazi stripped away from him, and this whole select committee and all that? Because you got to know that this, I believe, and maybe you have different facts on this, I believe this was on purpose, just as kind of a snub of the nose.
Oh, I think it's a snub of the nose. I mean, it's not an accident that Darrell Issa is not on the Benghazi Select Committee, is it?
No, it is not.
No, it's deliberate. And so, is it an accident that suddenly Darrell Issa has got a flurry of activity on House oversight, and he's subpoenaing and doing stuff, and it's like, wait, I'm sure Boehner is going, wait a second, I've got a select committee going on, you're supposed to shut the bleep up now.
Yeah, but you don't backdoor somebody and expect them to just take it, right? Especially a guy who's the richest guy in Congress.
Richest guy in Congress, a guy who's been arrested, a guy who's not considered a nice guy, and a guy who doesn't back down from a knife fight.
Sad stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
But enjoyable from this end, because the memo that he evidently leaked pretty much backs up the entire Obama argument, right?
Yes, it basically does. I mean, this is a memo that the administration sent to YouTube almost immediately after the Benghazi attack, in which they sort of warned YouTube. It was a bit of a naughty memo, really, because they suggested to YouTube that they didn't say, could you take down the video, the anti-Islam video, but they kind of suggested that because they said in the memo, it's causing riots, effectively, is what they said. And so that's about as clear as you can get. And you know that they believe that it was causing the attack. But ISA will not give on this one. He will not give on this one. But this memo actually came out 2 years ago. So it's very peculiar as to why he's releasing it now.
And again, you look at this and you go, if he's known this all along, what were all of these hearings for? And isn't it about time we start maybe a select committee to investigate Darrell Issa?
Oh, that could be messy.
I mean, we've spent 2 years on this, millions of taxpayers' dollars, all of the things that we weren't getting done focused on this, and now you find out that he's had this all along, basically saying there's no there, but we still went there.
Everybody should read the New York Times piece written on the 28th of December 2013. I can't remember the title of the piece, but if you Google Benghazi 28 December 2013, it is, in my view, the definitive piece written on Benghazi. And it's highly critical of the administration and of Chris Stevens, and of everybody, actually, and of state and of everybody. But it also says, hello, there was a video, and hello, there were riots. And we've spoken to the rioters.
Yeah, but none of that matters. You need a scandal. And speaking of scandal, the VA, the big scandal now, right?
The VA is a big scandal now, but Secretary Shinseki says he's not stepping down, or at least he said on Thursday he was not stepping down. That doesn't mean he's not stepping down, of course. He says he serves at the pleasure of the president. I don't think he's going to step down, certainly not until next week, which is when the first report, his report, has to be turned into President Obama, and then in June, a report from Rob Neighbors, the Deputy Chief of Staff, has to be turned in. I don't think President Obama, unless something extraordinary happens, is going to give Shinseki the axe until he gets one or two reports.
Yeah, but here's the thing. What I haven't heard anyone say yet, I know we love our scandals, but I haven't heard anyone say, maybe we need more nurses and more doctors and more support staff and more resources. I've heard no one say that in this, because you look at all of the cuts that have gone on. I've heard no one say that maybe the solution to this problem is we need more people to do the job.
Actually, the head of one of the government unions said that yesterday.
Well, see, and that's why we need to get rid of those damn unions.
Yeah, that's what he said yesterday.
And it's not surprising to me that I didn't see it, because they usually don't report what those people have to say.
Yeah, I saw it reported in the Hill.
All right, well, good. And finally, on the sports front, a couple of quick sports things. The 50 senators want the Redskins to change their names, right?
50 senators have written to the NFL commissioner saying the Redskins need to change their name because it's racist, which isn't a big surprise. What I think is interesting about this is Maria Cantwell, the Democratic senator from Washington State, circulated this letter, but she only circulated it to the Democrats, which I think was just a huge fail.
Yeah.
Why not circulate it to the Republicans? Let them either sign or go on the record as having not signed.
Well, because we already know they're racists and they wouldn't sign on it.
Well, John McCain said he probably would have signed.
Oh, he probably would have signed. Yeah, that's usually what you say when it's not in front of you. Well, I probably would have if you had offered it to me, and maybe he would have. I don't know, but you're right. I think it's a huge fail, but not surprising to me.
No, it's not. But I think it's like politically, it's just like, why not do the bipartisan thing? Why not do the smart thing? It was just weird. But anyway, Dan Snyder, I'm in D.C. Dan Snyder, the owner of the Redskins, says he's never going to change the name.
Well, he better not say that. They may take the team from him, like they did to the Clippers guy.
Oh, and Rochelle Sterling is making a deal with the NBA to sell the team, and that has been agreed to by Donald.
Do you feel uncomfortable with that? I mean, look, what he said was deplorable. But do you feel uncomfortable with this whole thing? I mean, I do. I feel a little like I got sucked into something that I shouldn't have been. It was a set-up phone call of an old curmudgeon-y racist guy that that's how these people are. I don't know. I
know the bleep set him up. I agree. She did. She set him up. You know, it's like Marion Barry. She set him up. But he said it, and then later on, he was interviewed by Anderson Cooper. He was interviewed by all kinds of people. He doubled down, man. The things he said about Magic Johnson on the record.
Not the brightest bulb in the, but it does show one thing to me though. You don't have to be really smart to be really freaking rich.
But how did he make that money?
Well, luck is what it is, and I guess if you're in those country clubs where those people aren't allowed, yeah, a lot of secrets going around there, maybe. And finally, the Mark Cuban response to that. Did you find that offensive? Some people emailed me saying, "Wow, he was talking about Trayvon Martin," and I got to be honest, and this is just me as a growing older white guy. I see people with hoodies. I see teenagers wearing hoodies and in groups. I generally move to the other side of the street too.
It wasn't so much that he said he moved to the other side of the street. It was that it's just the opener of the conversation, because he just said, I know I'm prejudiced and I know I'm bigoted in a lot of different ways. And I wanted to say, oh, can we count the ways, Mark? Can we just count the ways?
Yeah. Well, but isn't that really the country, though? I mean, we all have our idiosyncrasies and our things that we don't say in public, and good, we shouldn't. But I did agree with the one thing he said, though, which is you want the idiots speaking, you want the morons speaking out, so you know who they are.
I agree. You do want them speaking out. I'd rather know what they think than not know what they think. I agree.
I worked with a friend of mine a number of years back maybe 20 years ago. Older black guy, from Georgia. He was in his 50s, and he said, I preferred it back when they would call you the N-word to your face instead of stabbing you in the back with a smile on their face.
Yeah. You know where you are.
Yeah, you know where you stand. Anyway, Victoria, I hope you have a great holiday weekend, and we'll see you back here next week.
Look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Victoria Jones, Talk Radio News Service. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
Progress. In the 2012 elections, Republicans cast themselves as budget balancers by promising to whack welfare programs for the poor, snarling that such people are takers and moochers. Such vindictive sourness didn't play too well with voters, and Republicans now seem to have learned their lesson. Oh, they're still going after food stamps, school lunches, etc., with a vengeance, but this time with a gentle, even loving tone. The GOP's official message massagers now have their members saying that they want to, quote, help the poor by eliminating those programs, referring to them as soulless giveaways that sap their initiative and tether them to the cold, uncaring hand of government. The message is, we're doing this for the poor people's own good. Their chief budgeteer, Representative Paul Ryan, trotted out this theme at a recent right-wing rally, condemning school lunches as unloving Obama fare plopped on plates by unsmiling cafeteria personnel. What they're offering people is a full stomach and an empty soul, he oozed. If that doesn't make you gag, try another subsidized lunch program that tender-hearted GOP budget whackers never mention, much less demand that it be eliminated. It's the tax subsidy for corporate meals, drinks, and entertainment. Multimillionaire CEOs can go whining and dining on your and my dime, writing off their high-dollar lunches, cocktails, dinners, and club hopping as a business expense. And expensive it is for us taxpayers. This subsidy adds up to more than $12 billion a year. And that doesn't count the human cost of executive initiative that is sapped by this giveaway, and the lack of love a CEO feels from being dependent on unsmiling taxpayers. This is Jim Hightower saying we ought to be subsidizing healthy meals for poor people, especially school kids, but not a dime for fat cat CEOs dining out at Chez Gourmand.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's populist take on what the powers that be are up to. Find out more at hightowerlowdown.org.
Demanding the super rich to pay their fair share for once. The Rick Smith Show.
I got a bad case, I'm sorting it up, it's been cold in here, so file it up. I got a bad case, I'm sorting it
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Real quick, before we wrap things up tonight, let's go to the phone lines. Andy on line one. Andy, how are you, man?
I'm fine, Rick. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm looking forward to the weekend, looking forward to vacation. I got a honey-do list about a mile long.
Better you than me.
Yeah, well, you can only put things off for so many years. So what's on your mind?
Well, it's nice to have a home and something to take care of anyway. Yeah, I was just calling because I heard you talking to Victoria and that Dave and Barron appointment, I think, to the Second Circuit. Well, I think all the Democrats in the the Senate approved him. You know, that's the same thing as this Bybee and John Yoo, where they wrote the torture memos. Here, this guy writes the memos on allowing the drone strikes, extrajudicial killings. That guy Iwaki and his son, and there was another American citizen too involved there of Arab descent also, I think, was killed. And there's no, the 14th Amendment says there can't be any laws to abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. You can't deprive any person of life, liberty, property without due process of law. There has to be what don't they understand? You can't just go kill an American citizen.
Well, you know, Andy, we're in the post 9/11 world now. We're in the post 9/11 world now.
And here all the Democrats vote for this dude.
Yeah.
I'm no fan of Rand Paul. I probably disagree with him but he's got this one right.
Yeah. Well,
it's in the Constitution. You have to try somebody. You give somebody due process. You can't just say, push the button and say, gone, goodbye. On some flimsy bit of evidence.
I'm right there
and then
with you.
To make a mistake by killing the guy's son to top it off, a 14-year-old, 15-year-old kid, they killed him.
I'm with
Amazing.
you. I'm with you. Yeah, you're not getting an argument out of me.
And now he's going to get a lifetime appointment. And I'm supposed to be happy with the Democrats. I called my senators today, Feinstein and Boxer. I was just outraged. I was totally outraged. I go, you just gave me the greatest reason not to vote for a Democrat for the rest of my life.
Wow.
You guys just spit in the face of the Constitution. What don't you understand about the 14th Amendment? What don't you guys get?
And they'll fall back on it. We're in the post 9/11 world, Andy. I'm with you. I'm absolutely with you. Andy, I appreciate...
this is supposed to last forever, this Constitution.
Yeah, I know. I'm with you.
This is our guiding principles.
I appreciate the call, man. Always great talking with you.
All right, have a great weekend.
You do as well. I'll talk to you when I get back from vacation. Thanks so much.
Great.
Again, thanks for being here. Taking vacation next week, so we'll see you when we get back. Have a great holiday.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Its color like the tide of flood beneath the lunar sway, imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is coming to the USA.
We see the storm out on the horizon. The clouds grow dark in the midnight sky. We feel the fire burning in the belly. The flame leaps out with an angry cry. From the underground where the night is endless, from the mine and rig where our work is done. From every plant and every nation we cry, we are many, we are one. Power, there is power in the union. Power, there is power in our hands. Power, we stand and fight together. There's power in a union of many lands.